Digital assets are growing fast all over the world. New technologies coupled with the pandemic have accelerated the growth of digital currency, digital assets, and digital transformation of businesses in various sectors. Financial institutions and companies are now working to integrate and expand products, payment systems, and investments related to digital assets. According to a verified market research report, the global digital asset management market is projected to rise to nearly $14 billion by 2028. In Thailand, the number of digital asset trading accounts had risen to almost 2 billion by the end of 2021, up from 1,700,000 earlier that year. Meanwhile, digital assets such as cryptocurrencies, tokens, and digital money have grown in popularity. Digital assets, the new paradigm shift in the financial world. However, they come with risk and complexity, including erratic investing, rapid price growth, volatility, and insufficient security. To avoid potential damage to financial stability and economies, central banks and stock market regulators around the globe assessed the merits and hazards of digital assets and determined that their usage as a means of payments for goods and services needed to be regulated. However, more time is needed for regulators to catch up, so the right balance between digital assets and legal requirements. As the world stands on the verge of institutionalizing digital assets, this new ecosystem built on trust and innovation has enormous potential for growth and new business models that will move the financial ecosystem into the next era of money.
Sawadee krab. And good afternoon. Welcome to the International Virtual Forum presented by The Nation. My name is Jack Parinya Runbrapan.
And my name is Nina Nirasha Malisaklami. We will be the MCs for today virtual forums.
You know, this year, 2022, has what we believe marked the beginning of a new chapter, not only for Thailand, but for the entire world after more than 2 years of hardship. Now, thanks to COVID-19, everything has changed a lot. As a medium, The Nation is one of Thailand's major English language online news and new media content providers. We recognize the value of collaboration and combining forces to find a solution to revitalize businesses in all sectors and economies, not only in Thailand, but across the region and on a global scale.
And in order to serve as a catalyst in helping revive all industries, we are launching The Nation's virtual forum on a global scale, and our aim is to broaden perspectives, explore ideas, and collaborate to ferret out answers from speakers who are experts in their professions from across the regions and the world.
And to arrange this international forum, we are fortunate to have a strong media partnership with Asia News Network, a leading regional media alliance keeping us at the forefront of news and events in Asia and especially Southeast Asia.
And The Nation Thailand and ANN will partner to host international virtual forums on pressing issues such as business, finance, economy, society, international politics, and the impact of technology in the digital era, which will lead to an informative and insightful collaborations. And today we premiere the first virtual forum, a hot topic around the world, digital asset, the financial world's new paradigm shift. So today we're really excited about this special virtual forum, not only because it is our first in the series, but also because we have a lineup of key digital asset sector speakers from Thailand and the Asia Pacific regions. And this expert will be sharing their perspective. Expect to be enlightened about the financial system in the digital era, including the ecosystems, rules and regulations, cybersecurity, and business prospects.
The utilization of digital assets is becoming more and more prevalent, and the business model has been changed to make use of these digital assets. What is the status of digital assets in the financial mainstream, and what's next? We'll find out from our speakers from across Asia.
Today we have lined up 4 panel discussions with the region's digital asset expert and key stakeholders. We have Fusang from Malaysia, Kidax from the Philippines, Toko Crypto from Indonesia, Zipmec, CryptoMine, TokenX, and BitCup of Thailand.
And we also have the co-chairman of Blockchain Association of Singapore, and a former finance minister of Thailand, and the representative for the Security Exchange of Thailand. We're honored to have all of these distinguished speakers present at this virtual forum.
And this forum can be viewed by the public via our media, Zoom with Thai translations, Facebook The Nation, YouTube, and Line are some of the resources available. And now, Kun Jack, let's dive into the first sections, which will feature a special talk with Dr. Pakon Peetawatchai, President of the Stock Exchange of Thailand, on the topic of financial innovations for the future economy.
The end of last year, the Stock Exchange of Thailand, or SET, launched Thai Digital Exchange, or TDX. Why is the Stock Exchange of Thailand focusing on digital assets, and is this the economy of the future? We will talk with Dr. Pakon Peetawatchai, President of the Stock Exchange of Thailand, to find out more.
เราต้องเปลี่ยนปะ สวัสดีค่ะ
สวัสดีครับ
สวัสดีครับ
สวัสดีค่ะ Dr. Pakon. Thank you very much for joining the nation's virtual forum today. Welcome to the forum ค่ะ
ครับสวัส
So
ดีครับ
Dr. Pakon ค่ะ สวัสดีค่ะ So Dr. Pakon ค่ะ let's get to straight away to the point. How do you think that the digital asset will affect the traditional financial system, and could they eventually replace it?
Sure. First of all, thank you very much, the nation, for having me here today. And for that question, I believe that after you get through all my presentation, you will understand what the Stock Exchange of Thailand see in the future. So if I may, I would like to start on the presentation on 3 parts. The first part would be the current situation in the capital market in Thailand and in the world. And the second part would be on the development of the digital asset ecosystem in Thailand. And the last part, the third part, would be what the Stock Exchange of Thailand will do to facilitate that evolution. Let me move to the slide page 1, please.
All right. So we'll turn this session. We'll turn the session over to you, Dr. Pakon. You're going to introduce to us about a financial innovation for the future economy.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
When you look at the situation of the the capital market in Thailand at the moment, you will notice that Thailand have been doing very well. Our IPO market last year was 13.5 billion US dollar. It was ranked number 7 in Asia and number 18 in the world. It has been the most liquid stock exchange in ASEAN during the past, I would say, 10 years. And now we have more than 5 million trading accounts. And only last year, 1.6 million account new open. And now we have developing the new exchange, the live exchange, to cater the startup and SME. And now at the exchange, we have the new product called depository receipt that allow the investor to be able to invest in the asset globally. And also, if they would like to invest in their mutual fund, either locally or global, they can invest through the system at the exchange, through the online system, to the online trading platform. And to open the account easily, the Stock Exchange of Thailand facilitate the intermediary to be able to open the account without have to go to the face-to-face routine. It can be electronic open account. Thai company has been doing very well on sustainability basis. 24 Thai companies are now included into the Dow Jones Sustainability Index, the leading sustainability index in the world. And also, we have been doing very well on the financial literacy for our investor and also stakeholder. Now let's move to page 3. When you look at the traditional market and the digital asset market in the world at the moment, it's around scale 100 to 1 for the traditional to be bigger and the digital asset at the moment. However, when you look at the digital asset at the moment, most of the size, most of the market value are on the cryptocurrency, not the digital asset yet. However, at the moment, when you look at the global bond market, the size is roughly 119 trillion US dollar. The global stock market, the market value is roughly 123 trillion US dollars. For the digital asset at the moment, around 1.7 trillion US dollar. And like I mentioned, most of the market value of the digital asset at the moment are cryptocurrency. Please move to page 4, please. Now let's see what kind of digital assets are there in the world. There are 3 main type of the digital asset. The first one we call investment token, which can be either asset link or it can be project based, and it can be either the asset of some company or some underlying asset that investor or the issuer would like to offer into the market. And the second digital asset is called utility token, and it can be ready to use and not ready to use, and it depends. It's very much like the coupon that we get, that we can use it to exchange to the services and goods, either now or in the future. And the last type of the digital asset is the cryptocurrency. And for the cryptocurrency, it's not just one type. There are many types. It can be central bank digital currency, or it can be private digital currency. And for the private digital currency, it can be either what we call stable coin or blank coin. The thing that has been investing quite a lot at the moment is the blank coin that doesn't have any underlying asset. For example, like Bitcoin, Ethereum, those are blank coin. And now let's move to why investors are interested in this digital asset. When you look at any new thing, there are both portion that are innovation and another portion that are the risks that we may never think about before. Let's talk about the innovation first. These digital assets certainly are the new asset class. The return of this asset may not be correlated to the traditional asset. That's why it contribute to the diversification feature that are in this new digital asset. Many people investing in it because it doesn't have correlation to the asset that he has. That's why his portfolio are more risk less when you compare with the portfolio that doesn't have the digital asset. And also a democratization of the financing. Why? Because now small and new enterprise can raise funds through this new channel. And also investors who might never have a chance to invest in this new kind of like startup or SME because they don't have access to those assets, now can have more easily time and channel to invest in this new asset. But at the same time, we need to look into the risk also. Since this is a new type of asset, it doesn't have much liquidity. It doesn't have that many assets in the market. Certainly, there will be high volatility. The asset price can swing widely. And also, since it's new, the regulations might not be ready for them yet. We certainly would see the new regulation coming out from the regulator to control and to monitor all these assets to protect both the investor investment and also to give the standard to the fundraising. And lastly, the name is called digital asset. It has a new risk that is the authenticity and also the cyber security risk, because there is no middleman here. Everything is on the platform, the trading platform, and every verification would be non-face-to-face. You will have to understand all these new cyber security risk features. Now let's move to page 6. What would be the difference between these two markets and how, in my opinion, it would create coexistence of the two markets? In the traditional market, you will notice that it's always centralized market. It has exchange, it has single regulator, it has the stakeholder that work all over the world on the financial advice, on the trading, on the clearing. It also very well regulated. The regulator has a platform, has the rule regulation that are standardized all over the world. It has also the well-established investor base. For example, in Thailand, there are retail investor group, there are local institutional investor, there are foreign institutional investor. And normally, the company that come to raise the fund are linked to the real economy. They are mostly the medium-sized and large-sized company. But when you look at the digital asset market, it's certainly going to be a decentralized market. However, at the beginning, there might be some regulator or some party that be centralized first, but at the end, it will be decentralized. And also, the regulation will be gradually and continuously developing. Investor base, it's going to be adding many more new investor type, like the young generation, like the smaller retail investor, or either the institutional investor who are very interested in the startup and the SME. Those are going to be the group of new investors that come into the market. And lastly, very important, this will be the market for the company that just start, the company that have a lot of potential. However, it might not have that long his operation. This would be the new group of investor and the fundraiser. Now, let's move into a comparison page. People always think that digital asset market are so different. However, when you compare it piece by piece to the traditional asset market, you will notice that there are a lot of similarity, but the player will be different. For example, if the fundraiser want to come into raising the fund in the market, in the capital market, what will they do? They talk to the financial advisor. They talk to the banker. They talk to get the issuer advice. In the digital asset market, it's the duty of the token issuer is who will provide the issuer service, who will provide the primary market activity. You see, there are a lot of similarity between the financial advisor and the token issuer. After they list or after they issue the token, what's next? They are doing the trading in the secondary market. For the traditional asset market, those will be done in the stock exchange as a secondary market provider. In the digital asset exchange platform, it will be traded through the digital asset exchange, which will perform the secondary market operating function also. And now, in the traditional asset market, you trade it to the broker, investor service, who provide you the investor service. In the digital asset market, you have the wallet service, who keep both of their cash, cryptocurrency, or digital asset. And those are people who performing quite a similar function to the broker. And lastly, where do you keep your asset and either the traditional asset or the digital asset? For the traditional market, you keep it in the custodian account or the broker account. For the digital asset market, you keep it in the wallet keeper. So you can start to see the similarity between the two markets. That's why, please move to the next page. This is what we at the Stock Exchange of Thailand see. We think that our market, the traditional market that has been growing almost twofold since 2012. At that time, we have a market capitalization of roughly 380 billion US dollars. And now, at the moment, our market cap is going up to 610 billion US dollar. Another 10 years, certainly, we expect that the traditional capital market will grow still. We don't know how much. However, the additional thing would be the digital asset market certainly would be growing also. And it certainly would coexist with the traditional market. You might wonder why. Let me give you an example. Let's say there's a business operator who would like to raise like 100 billion baht, roughly 3 billion US dollars. What will they do? The first thing that they might think is that, okay, how can I utilize the digital asset market? But when you want to raise something like 3 billion US dollars, how many investors do I need? What type of controlling mechanism that I need to provide so that people will believe in a project that costs 3 billion US dollars? When at the same time, he looked at the traditional market and he said, okay, I have 10,000 investors in this market already. I have an FA who can handle this size of transaction easily within a few months, maybe a few weeks. Then I use the traditional market to raise these funds to invest in the business activity that I have been doing. And they all know my business activity. They all know the performance of my company. So you can see that there will be many business operators who still depend on the traditional asset market. Now, let's see why the digital asset market would be growing also. Let's say you are the owner of the new business that doesn't have much history. However, your idea is so good. And then you know that the people who are interested in your project would be young guy or the guy who can take a lot of risk, but they are not going to invest a lot in your project. They're going to be a few thousand people who invest in your project. In this case, the digital asset market would be perfect for that kind of project because it's a new project that doesn't have history. However, it has a good story to sell to the investor who would like to investing in the high expectation return and high risk project. This is why we at the Stock Exchange of Thailand offering the digital asset market, digital asset opportunity also. And what we are doing is that we're gonna offer an open platform to link the trading of the traditional asset and digital asset because we believe that it can coexist. Also, we will focus on the investment token and utility token. We will not touch on cryptocurrency. We will provide the trading, clearing, and internal wallet services for those investment token and utility token. And we will serve an application programming interface platform and portal so that anyone who is the token issuer, who is the other exchange, who is the wallet, who is the custodian, to be able to connect to the TDX, the platform that we offer. And we wish that, and we expected that this platform will be able to launch in the third quarter of this year. This is the page that will explain how our application and our exchange will work together. At the moment, we have an online trading platform for streaming that offered by our subsidiary, SetTrade company. SetTrade used to be able to provide the services for the investor to access into the Stock Exchange of Thailand, MAI, TFEC, and the mutual fund platform. And in the future, the live platform that will offer to do the trading for the startup and SME. This SetTrade will also connect to the Thailand Digital Exchange to provide the online application on trading for both traditional market and digital asset market. So you can see that this is the thing that will happen in the future. investor will never have to know which market he access. He only use this online trading platform and be able to access to all the investment either locally, globally, traditionally, or digitally. This is the view that we at the Stock Exchange of Thailand have been having in our mind. And we hope that we would be able to facilitate this evolution of the Thai capital market, and not just the Thai capital market by itself, but the connectivity of the Thai capital market to the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Pakon.
Thank you very much.
Looks like you're aiming for a launch in Q3 of this year.
Yes, it depends on the approval from all the regulators. And if once we get those approval, we would be able to provide the service almost as soon as the approval we got.
And do you anticipate that your investors that would be accessing this market initially, would they be mostly from the Thai market, or would you start to see investors from foreign nationals as well?
In my opinion, initially, the investor would be from Thailand because the product that we have would be most likely locally.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Dr. Pakon, President of the
You're
Stock
welcome.
Exchange of Thailand. A wonderful and very informative opening speech about financial innovations for the future economy.
Thank you very much.
You're
Kap.
welcome. Thank
Thank
you.
you, Kap. Okay, very interesting, and I think a lot of people out there who are interested to get started in investing in these digital assets may feel excited about these opportunities for a market that anyone can access, really.
Actually, it's really good because there's a lot of doors of opportunities, which is the traditional way and the new way, or the modern way, digital way, will actually combine together. I think this one is very excited to.
And it's not just investors, but also companies that are looking to raise capital to expand their businesses as well. It's very exciting.
That's right. So next we shall proceed to the second sessions and hear our distinguished speakers on the topic digital assets heading to the world financial mainstream.
And our speakers from around the region include Mr. Marcus Lim, CEO and co-founder of ZipMex Singapore, Mr. Henry Chong, CEO of Fusang, Malaysia and Hong Kong, and Mr. Nichelle Gaba, founder and CEO of PDAX Philippines.
Before heading to the next two sessions, we have an infographic to show and explain the different kinds of digital assets and how they work. And after that, I'll hand the stage over to our moderator, Kun Jack.
Thank you. And now we are joined by our distinguished speakers. Hello, my name is Jack, and I am the host of this virtual forum. Thank you very much for giving us an opportunity to welcome you to the Nation Forum. First off, I would like to ask each of you to explain a bit more about your companies. May I start with Mr. Marcus from ZipMex? What is the mission and vision of your company as well as your latest movement?
Sure, thanks, Jack. I'm really excited to be here with everyone today. So ZipMex is a regional digital asset platform. We're headquartered in Singapore. We're licensed in Thailand. And we're also in Indonesia and Australia. So we provide the ability for our customers to transact in digital assets and cryptocurrencies. And we also provide a platform for them to earn interest. And we're also kind of moving into the payment space and the NFT space.
Okay, great. And Mr. Henry?
Hello, everybody. My name is Henry Chong. I'm the CEO of Fusang. Fusang operates Asia's first digital stock exchange, and we think that our platform and our unique combination of technology, regulatory licenses, and operational know-how lets us provide this end-to-end life cycle for digital securities. The issuance, tokenization, listing, and trading of them. We hold a number of licenses across Asia, most famously of which is the Fusang Exchange, where we're licensed, as I said, to be the primary listing venue for companies for IPOs and also act as our market regulator. And our team is split across 5 cities today, but really all centered around one single vision, which is to make it as easy for people to invest into companies as it is for those people to buy products from companies online.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Henry. And Mr. Nishal.
Hi, so my name is Nishal. I'm founder and CEO of PDAX. PDAX is a local licensed crypto exchange based in the Philippines. So we do a little bit of what Marcus also mentioned. We're a platform for the trading of digital assets against the Philippine peso. And we also do a bit of securities issuance and trading. More recently, a couple of years ago, we launched the national treasury bonds on the Ethereum blockchain. And we're going deeper into the Philippines as opposed to having a more regional presence. So yeah, and more recently, we've also been focused on the growth of the NFT-based games here in the Philippines, and are expanding more use cases around those types of applications.
Thank you very much, Mr. Nishal. Now, I'd like to ask each of you to give us an update about the situation of digital assets in each of your territories. Perhaps can I start with Mr. Henry?
Absolutely. Well, as I said, Fusang operates across a number of jurisdictions. Our stock exchange is based in Labuan in Malaysia, but we have people and officers all over. And to me, that's really what is unique about digital assets, that in many ways, they start to dissolve geographical boundaries. But when it comes to things like security tokens or digital securities, what Fusang really focuses on, I think it's important to remember that even though you have a new technology layer, you still have to comply with rules and regulations in jurisdictions around the world. And in our view, if you have something like a security token, just because it's new tech doesn't mean that you shouldn't be following and complying with existing rules. That said, I think that the security token market as a whole globally is moving at incredible speed. Every other week now, you hear about a bank or a country looking to use tokenization technology to represent traditional assets like shares, bonds, funds, etc. And there was a recent thought leadership report put out by a consulting firm, Quinlan & Associates, here in Hong Kong, that estimated that by 2030, a quarter of all publicly listed securities around the world will be tokenized. That's about a $4 trillion issuance volume. And we're very excited to be able to build some of what we consider the foundational infrastructure pieces that we think are necessary to get us from here to there.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. And what about you, Mr. Marcus? How about the environment in Singapore when it comes to digital assets?
Sure. So as I mentioned, we are actually regulated in 4 countries. So Singapore being our parent company, and we're regulated under MAS. So as of recent, MAS has been releasing licenses to a lot of the players that have been applying for the last 2 years. So the Payment Services Act is the governing act for digital assets, and there are many limbs under that. So digital payment token is a limb underneath the Payment Services Act. And so, the MAS have been quite supportive, but as of recent, they've been quite restrictive in terms of what can be advertised to the general public in Singapore as they're trying to, essentially kind of limit the risk exposure for some of these retail investors. But more broadly, we are also in Thailand, in Indonesia, and also in Australia. And Thailand is actually the most kind of advanced in terms of the regulatory framework for cryptocurrencies. They started back in 2018, where the emergency decree came in, and where we saw a lot of the exchanges kind of grandfathered into the new system. We were a new applicant that got licensed back in 2020 and been operating for the last year and a half. The regulators are also taking a very lockstep approach from a regional perspective in terms of things like travel rule, in terms of what can be advertised, and also in terms of what kind of tokens can be listed. So the regulators are trying to catch up with the changing environment of cryptocurrency, moving from just a pure exchange model where people are just buying and selling crypto to things like, DeFi, CeFi, and then the NFT and the metaverse space. So our job really is to kind of work with the regulators, educate them so that they are well equipped with the right tools to be able to provide the right policy or framing the policy in order for it to be the right, in order for it to be conducive in the ecosystem.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Marcus. And Mr. Nichelle.
Yeah. I find it so interesting that the Southeast Asian markets are experiencing their growth spurts in different and interesting ways. In the Philippines, a lot of the growth had come through this emerging play-to-earn trend, where a lot of Filipinos during the pandemic who lost their jobs or lost their main source of income turned to games that allow them to earn tokens. And these tokens, which are listed on a variety of decentralized and centralized exchanges, allowed for them to eventually convert into Philippine peso and live off of those earnings. So the play-to-earn trend in the Philippines led to probably the growth that we're seeing now, where there are about 3 million or 3.5 million MetaMask users in the Philippines. Now, because of that strong crypto-friendly or crypto-savvy base, we're also seeing play-to-earn actually had acted as a gateway use case for all kinds of use cases for cryptocurrency. So that extends to trading, which we've seen already over the past couple of years, but also in remittances and applications in the securities space. So I echo what my co-panelists shared about developing regulatory framework in their respective jurisdictions. Here in the Philippines, the regulators have been very progressive in creating rules around all the use cases surrounding crypto, and that includes digital securities as well. So definitely a lot of exciting things happening, both from a market standpoint and also a regulatory standpoint.
Okay, so you've mentioned crypto games, also a lot of trading in cryptocurrencies. NFTs have been on the tip of a lot of investors' tongues, whether you are very well versed in digital assets or just people who are hearing about it and wanting to get involved. Can you also identify other trends or local interests that are starting to emerge within the digital space, perhaps related to investments and payments?
Yeah, so for payments, I think one thing, at least speaking for the Philippines, one thing that has been very strong for us is cross-border remittance. The Philippine peso being a third currency, and almost all of our migrant workers sending money through another third currency just ensures that that process is not going to be cheap, right? So the remittance use case also grew in popularity, probably not as sexy, but definitely in terms of volumes, they're there. In terms of investments, the Philippine equities market, which primarily has been intermediary based, has actually struggled to expand for obvious reasons, right? The Philippines is an archipelago, and until very recently, there has been no way to conduct meaningful KYC without doing things face to face, and so from a practicality standpoint, brokers were really not able to create branches everywhere in the Philippines to service the population. So more recently, we're seeing a lot of corporates and institutions who are now asking themselves whether it probably makes sense for them to raise capital via the token markets. So there's a lot of stuff happening on that front as well.
All right. And Mr. Henry, how about you? Do you have any trends that you think are worth keeping an eye on?
Well, here at Fusang, we're obviously big believers in securities, as I said. I think the world of cryptocurrencies and NFTs is unbelievably exciting. But I think there's also a lot to be said for what I call the other 99% of world assets, the shares, bonds, funds, the real estate that we live in, really everything that we see around us today. I think all of those assets can and will and should be tokenized as well. And I think that's really an inevitability. I cannot imagine that in the years to come, we will continue to have literal pieces of paper that represent all of the assets that we own. I'm convinced that blockchain technology makes a lot of sense and that we're going to see traditional assets come online, be tokenized, listed and traded, very similar to how cryptocurrencies are today. The big difference, of course, is that it becomes very important to be clear when you have a security token, what is the underlying asset? Does the token directly represent, for example, shareholding in a company? What are the rights that I get? What are the actual assets that I am owning? And I think that people can and will start to look at things in a slightly different lens, where they say, what are the fundamental value drivers of securities like that?
Okay, very interesting. And Mr. Marcus, why do you think that the world needs to pay attention to these digital assets, and that it's not just something that's optional or fringe, but that it is becoming more increasingly mainstream?
So I think the world definitely needs to pay attention, because the people that are adopting digital assets are effectively the millennial generation. And as they say, the genie's out of the bag. So there's no way to kind of, pull this back into the bottle. It is what it is right now. And all regulators have to pay attention, because everyone is adopting it. Almost everyone is adopting it. So the key here is, how do policymakers and regulators think about ensuring that they still have a governing system to their monetary policy, right, in terms of their local currency, and how do they deal with, cryptocurrency, which could, in essence, kind of conflict with their monetary policy, as we kind of see, flows of funds going out or going from, local currency to cryptocurrency. And this is something that, the regulators are trying to grapple with. So that's one. The second one is around the applications of blockchain, or if not kind of cryptocurrency. As we've seen over the last 6 months, we've moved towards, the NFT market space, and then very quickly into the metaverse space. We've seen big companies like Facebook rebranding themselves into Meta, which effectively is focusing into the metaverse space. And so for a lot of the brands, what we've seen over the pandemic is that, we've seen multiple lockdowns and people are not interacting as much in the physical world. And now they're kind of moving into the virtual world. So the question is, how do we, create a virtual world that everyone can coexist, and for the brands to be able to be omnipresent, in that space versus in the physical space. So I think this is a really kind of important, thematic that is, evolving very, very quickly. So the key is, how do businesses and also the government is able to evolve with the changing times?
Interesting. That I was wondering about how the pandemic was affecting the digital assets. We also have a lot of political conflicts, especially as what we see in Eastern Europe and the Ukraine. Can any of you give us your insights in how these events may be affecting these markets?
Sure, I can definitely.
Oh, okay.
So I can kind of definitely add in there. So, I mean, the key piece in the Russia-Ukraine war is obviously the financial sanctions that are being implied by the Western world into Russia. And, what we've basically seen is the restriction of the SWIFT network into all Russian banks. So effectively, anyone with a Russian bank account is not able to remit money. The ruble, of course, has basically plummeted against the dollar. And so if we kind of look at Bitcoin, for instance, in a decentralized format, people are able to still transfer value. So for the very first time, what we can see in this kind of modern era, if you want to call it, or at least we did during the existence of cryptocurrency, is that people are able to kind of still remit value. So whilst the ruble was plummeting, we actually saw a reasonable spike in the price of Bitcoin, because a lot of the Russians and also the Ukrainians were actually buying Bitcoin in order to continue to transfer value or as a hedge against their local currency, i.e. the ruble.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Henry, do you have any insight on this as well?
Absolutely. I think the world is always volatile, right? Sometimes more than others. But I think that what's happening in the world today is a great reminder that as much as we are trying to construct a new digital ecosystem, this all still needs to be grounded in the way that the rest of the world works. Not just in terms of politics, but also just in terms of, as Marcus was mentioning, how asset flows happen. And I think that for the cryptocurrency markets as a whole to take the leap into what I think of as kind of crypto 2.0, where we can live in this vision of a world in which really all assets are tokenized. Novel cryptocurrencies, NFTs, securities, even traditional fiat currencies through things like CBDCs. We need to understand that all of these asset classes are going to interrelate. And I think we need to start viewing cryptocurrencies in that broader framework and lens. Today, the truth is the world of digital assets and the world of traditional assets is still very split. And I think inevitably these things will start to merge. And as I said, I think we will start to look at tokenization as a technology layer that really influences how all assets everywhere are issued, tokenized, listed, and traded.
All right. And let's say there are retail investors out there who maybe are a bit hesitant about entering the digital asset market. What kind of advice would you give to these potential investors about dipping their toe into this space? Maybe I'll start with you, Mr. Michel.
Well, that's definitely, it's very difficult to give financial advice. As you know, investment and financial decisions are always bespoke to the individual. But, for people who are not exposed to crypto right now, I think it's important to acknowledge that if you are not currently in crypto, you are not exactly taking a neutral position here. Neutral in the sense that you're keeping yourself free of risk. Probably the safest way to go is to have a balanced portfolio where you at least have some exposure to crypto. Now, sharing a bit of my personal view on the crypto markets, what we're seeing is here is a trend that will lead to a once-in-a-generation wealth transfer. And the later a person is to join this trend or to take part in the crypto markets, the more you're staying at the losing end of the wealth transfer. Now, what we're seeing in crypto is not something that just affects finances, right? It's something that affects ownership and how we transact, even in day-to-day commerce going forward. I think I would wish to echo also what Marcus said earlier about how, in relation to your earlier question about its, I guess, geopolitical implications. Well, on the one hand, crypto could be probably used to circumvent restrictions on SWIFT, ergo, not allow SWIFT to be weaponized or these sanctions to be weaponized. The reverse could also be true, right? Eventually, because of the transparency and the traceability inherent to crypto, perhaps in the future, sanctions could be made more effective. And that may or may not be a good thing, but at least what's proven true is that greater transparency has always served the benefit of the public. So long story short, what we're seeing is a very fast moving, massive wave. and we have to take every individual will probably have to take a position in crypto, whether it's buying something small relative to the portfolio or something very big. Certainly, everyone's probably got to be exposed at this point.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Nischel. Mr. Marcus, how about you? I noticed that there was a big ZipMex roadshow taking place in Bangkok at Siam Paragon and Icon Siam to try to introduce people to the metaverse, to cryptocurrencies, to NFTs, explaining that at a very basic level what these digital assets are. What do you think are other ways that would be potentially advantageous for you to reach out to somebody who may be of a different generation that thinks, well, maybe this is something for me to look into?
Yeah, definitely, Jack. So I think what's really interesting is if we looked at the last couple of years only, is that, when you ask me the question of, how, for someone who hasn't got into cryptocurrency, what advice would you give them? And I think that narrative back then was around investing into cryptocurrency. But the narrative now has ultimately evolved. It's not just about investing into cryptocurrency, but how do you interact with it? Whether it's in art form or whether it's in the metaverse form, right? And I think the applications, as you start to broaden in this spectrum, it's about the various different touch points that people can now, see themselves, interacting in this entire ecosystem, because it's no longer about, if I'm going to invest today $1, how much money I'm going to make in 5 or 10 years' time. It's about how do I interact it from, like the NFT space? How do I interact it from, the gaming space? Or, if there are a lot of kind of traditional gamers, how do they move in from, the kind of the Web 2.0 to Web 3.0, right? And so our job really isn't to force anyone through one pigeonhole, which is to say, come to us, buy crypto first, then go into the other spaces. But rather, our thesis is there is so many applications to digital assets and in this entire ecosystem. We want to educate you in the way that you want to be educated. If you don't like investing, that's perfectly fine, because we understand people's risk tolerance or risk appetite is completely different, and they still are, still challenged by this concept of investing into cryptocurrency because it's not, entirely asset-backed, at least for most of them, right? And so for those who are gamers, right, how do they transition from the Web 2.0 to the Web 3.0, right? Content creators, for example, who are, kind of traditional artists or just general content creators, how do they move into the NFT space, right? That does not exist, or that does not require them to actually start investing into it. But content creators for the NFT space, right, is about how they can showcase their talent, not just within the construct of their, within the community or the country, but to the entire world, where we have marketplaces that basically allow you to go global from day one. So I think the key here for us, even though we are, quite rooted in Thailand, for example, and what we've done in Siam Paragon is really is a foretaste, for a lot of, people who are very interested in the space, kind of showing them what are some of the things that can play out over the next couple of years, how they can interact with this space, right? And then slowly to help them build that bridge, right, into the virtual world.
Okay. So it's more not just about a speculation of putting in a bit of money and hoping that you turn a profit in a few months or a year.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think for most people are very much just bulk of the people are very much interested about a financial outcome. And for those people who are just interested about financial outcome, then what we say to them is, you have a short-term goal and then you have a long-term goal. And your long-term goal, if you're looking to invest, then it's buy and hold, right? It's similar to, securities as well. And then in terms of the short-term goal, where you want to trade, that's fine, right? So you have a strategy around the short-term and the long-term. And the deployment, like what Michelle mentioned about, it's all about kind of diversification and deployment of your own assets. How much of your entire wealth do you want to allocate into digital assets? The common rhetoric has always been, put 1% or put 5%. Some people are more audacious, they go 10 and 20%, right? Or some people have 100% of their entire wealth. what we are seeing is the trend is for that 1% is slowly going up, in a very exponential rate towards the 100%. I wouldn't say everyone's at 100%, of course, but more and more people are kind of putting more of their wealth into the digital asset space, especially for the digital natives, which are the millennial generation, the Gen Zs, right? And I think that's why, kind of tying back to your previous question about, why does the world need to take note, is because this next generation is going to be the generation that's going to be leading the world, and this is what they are focused on.
Okay. Mr. Henry, I want to ask you, I think when a lot of people think about NFTs, many of them are thinking about GIFs or pieces of digital art. Can you give some examples of these asset-backed tokens that are going to become more and more mainstream and something that people would be able to understand, in a concrete sense?
Absolutely. That's a great question. And I personally have never liked the NFT label because to me, that's a type of technology. We have fungible tokens, right? One of many in a class. We have non-fungible tokens, makes total sense. And the idea of using an NFT to represent assets that are inherently singular in nature, that could be art, it could be, the home that you own or your car title, etc. Again, I think that makes a lot of sense. What I think people need to start drilling into, and actually as individual investors, and I agree, I think, with everything that my fellow panelists are saying, but I think as individuals, it's also quite important that we take responsibility for our own investment decisions. And I think it's important to really start by asking 3 fundamental questions, right? As a very base layer, no matter what asset class you're looking into. Question number 1 is, who is this counterparty that you're dealing with? The truth is, whenever you make any investment, digital or otherwise, you are interacting with a platform, with a counterparty. I think it's important that you know who they are, how they're licensed, and even just the legal relationship that you have between you and your counterparty. That's number 1. Number 2, it's very important that when you buy into a asset or a token, you understand, well, what exactly is the nature of this token? Am I buying a token that represents, a share in a company? Am I buying a token that represents ownership in an art piece, for example? What exactly am I getting? I worry that with a lot of NFTs, for example, people sometimes believe that holding a token gives them ownership or legal rights that it may or may not, right? So the idea of having a token represent ownership in digital art makes total sense. But again, most NFTs don't actually represent that. So I think question number 2 you need to ask yourself is, what is the actual nature of this token? And then, of course, question number 3 is, well, what does this underlying asset link to this token? What exactly is that in the first place? So let's say you're coming to a platform like Fusang and you're buying a token that directly represents equity. Great. But hey, what exactly is that company? Is it a good company? Is it a good investment, etc.? And I think it's very important that people ask those 3 layers: counterparty, the legal nature of the asset, and of course, the underlying asset itself, no matter what kind of technology we apply. Having fungible tokens, non-fungible tokens, these are all just efficient ways of recording data, allowing us to be able to transfer tokens from person to person. It doesn't necessarily affect the nature of the underlying investment itself. And I think we need to be careful to separate those 2 things out. And I think that the same is true for regulators as well. I think some of the more sophisticated countries, Thailand included, have taken a very cogent view of regulation around digital assets by saying, look, it's new tech. New tech comes all the time. That's very exciting. Let's look through to the underlying nature of what these tokens represent when we need to decide how to regulate them.
Okay, and when it comes to regulation, when you see a lot of money being exchanged between parties, inevitably the issue of tax starts to creep in. Can I get your perspective from any of you about what we should be keeping an eye on when it comes to issues related to tax?
Sure. So I can probably start off. So out of the 3 or 4 countries that we've been dealing with, Thailand has been the most vocal about capturing tax as part of the transaction that customers, the customers or capital gains that customers achieve over their kind of investment. And I think previously, what they were looking at was a pure straight line withholding tax, which in Thailand was 15%. What they soon realized is that actually that sparked a lot of outrage in the public because it does not kind of take into account whether people have actually made a profit or a loss in their investment in crypto assets. So, the Revenue Department has kind of taken a few steps back and really tried to consider what is the best way kind of moving forward in terms of taxing capital gains effectively. So they've kind of taken a 12-month breather to kind of really, rethink their kind of tax system, which I think is a good thing. And we've been quite vocal about it. My co-founder, Dr. Apalapa, has been quite vocal about it. And so they've kind of taken this position now. For Singapore, I think as of recent, the government came out to say that they're going to start taxing people who are selling NFTs, which is quite interesting. And I think they haven't quite landed on a position yet. As most of you know, Singapore does not have any capital gains tax, so any crypto gains are basically tax-free. And actually, as a result of this, a lot of people from around the world, be it Australia or China or in Europe, are actually coming into Singapore because of this tax regime at this point in time. So it's extremely attractive. And there are other countries as well, like, for example, Portugal, which has zero tax, and Dubai as well. For Indonesia itself, there is a propensity wanted to capture capital gains tax as well, but the government hasn't been as proactive as the other governments around in this region. So they're still taking a backseat view on this. But yeah, that's kind of the lay of the land at the moment.
Correct me if I'm misunderstanding this, but with traditional stocks, etc., usually you can hold the stocks and then they can rise in value or they can fall in value, but you don't usually get hit by a tax until you sell and make a profit, and then on that profit you would get taxed a certain percentage. So I guess the muddying issue with digital currencies is that you're holding these, for example, cryptocurrencies, and they may rise in value. And where is that cutoff that you would then calculate what you're getting, what you would be responsible for paying?
Yeah, so this is the really challenging part, right? Because if you invested in an online brokerage account, you can easily track when you bought and sold an asset. With crypto exchanges, the moment you deposit a digital asset like Bitcoin, the regulator or the exchange wouldn't actually know at what price did you buy it at. And this is the fundamental issue that most, I guess for Thailand and in Indonesia are trying to grapple with. There are kind of effectively two ways of taxing, this, I guess, this ecosystem. One is, looking at capital gains tax, which is effectively how much money you've made. And the challenge that I've just kind of mentioned about is what they're trying to grapple with. The other is a transactional tax, so VAT or GST, that can be kind of embedded into the actual commission that we charge as an exchange, or could be, a one-off transaction that the customer pays. So it just depends on who pays for the tax bill. It can be shared or it could be both.
Okay. Mr. Henry, do you have perspective on this as well?
Absolutely. I hope our Zoom doesn't boot us off in just a minute. But in case it does, I'll join back again. To me, tax, as I said, it's very important to look through to the nature of the underlying assets. And I hope actually that regulators around the world take that view as well. I don't think it makes any sense for someone to say, I want to tax NFTs as a type of technology.
Okay, it looks like Mr. Henry will be logging back in. He was in the middle of answering a question about his opinion about how tax would be related to transactions in the digital space. So I'm going to wait until they log back in, but it's very interesting to hear about how these markets in some ways are similar to the traditional markets in how we're trying to perceive them. But then because it's so new and that there's so many new rules that are being made every day around them and the way that we interact with them, it seems that the borders are not as defined, and this creates a kind of uncertainty. And I'd like to get our panelists to maybe address this about when I asked the question of if you're someone new to investing in digital assets, how would you, what would you recommend for them as a first step to getting involved in these markets? But I think it's also interesting to hear about where do they see in the not the long term, but more in the foreseeable future, where these markets are evolving into, so that we could perhaps get some insight into how we could learn about more opportunities where we as investors or as potential business owners that want to raise capital for our own activities, how can we take advantage of this digital space? Now, it's very interesting to hear that when I asked them the question about how are digital assets being viewed in your country or in your territory, for them, territory is no longer limited by national borders, and it seems that that everyone is taking a more global view about their business. It's not everything is limited by the passport anymore, and it seems that everything is becoming more fluid. Our panelists are back, and thank you very much for rejoining us. Mr. Henry, you were in the middle of answering about what you felt, in your opinion, implications surrounding tax and digital assets.
Yeah, well, maybe the internet gods thought that we were talking for too long, so I'll keep this short. As I said, I think we should always look through to the underlying asset, whether it's tax, whether it's regulation, that makes the most sense. Unfortunately, this isn't always true in every jurisdiction. And I think especially for what I call crypto native assets like Bitcoin, where the technology and the asset are so intertwined, sometimes people, quite frankly, get confused and treat the technology and the asset as one inseparable thing. But I think it's always very important to look through to understand the underlying legal nature of assets. And that's why, at least in our focus around security tokens, where you are looking to create something like an equity token and have a token directly represent a share in a company, I think that's much simpler than creating more convoluted structures, let's say where you have some kind of derivative or investment contract. As it is, the kind of technology that we are introducing is novel. I don't think we need to also necessarily touch the underlying legal nature of a lot of securities. We can keep that, and we can just transform from having a whole bunch of paperwork and paper shares, for example, into using digital tokens. And like I said, whether as a firm, as an issuer, as an investor, or even as a regulator, I personally think that's the right approach to take.
Okay, thank you. I have a question regarding what we see as in the foreseeable future, within the next 1 or 2 years, that each of you feel is a trend or a development that you feel that is something that we really need to keep an eye on as potential investors or as business owners who are looking to enter the digital asset space? Something that if you were to meet somebody on the street and they found out where you worked and they asked you, oh, so what do you think is something that I should be looking at? Not necessarily for speculation, but as Mr. Marcus had said, something that is really interesting to learn about or to explore for potentially adding to our lives. Mr. Nichelle, can we start with you?
Yeah, I guess I can start. Certainly, what I would talk about is while crypto has gone more mainstream now at the retail segment, what we should watch out for is institutional participation. I think a lot of people have been talking about this for a couple of years now, but a lot of pieces need to have been in place for institutions to actually come into the market. We now see a lot of traditional custody providers, global custodians entering into the digital asset space. We're seeing independent firms set up as value agents and accounting firms and financial advice. So eventually we will see more and more companies asking themselves what should be their crypto strategy. So that's what I look out for, because definitely while it will inform price action, on particularly scarce assets like Bitcoin, it would also improve the underlying infrastructure to the point that opening up a crypto account probably will feel no different from opening a bank account, and we could really transact using crypto in a daily. Tax also, at the earlier question, eventually as this space more and more value creation takes place in the digital asset state, there will be more pressure on legislators and tax authorities of the world to start having to capture some of that value for their respective governments. So those two things, institutionalization and tax.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Nichelle. Mr. Marcus?
I think we're hearing a lot of background noise from the studio.
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. Guys, can we keep it down? Okay, thanks. All right, sorry. Can Mr. Marcus, can you answer the same question about what you feel is in the immediate future something to keep a very close eye on?
I'm really sorry, but there's a lot of background noise happening. So I can't actually quite respond or hear.
Sorry, do we have some background noise?
It seems like it's coming from the studio.
Nope, we don't have anyone in here with us. Everyone's being okay.
Sure. Sorry, could you repeat the question again? Sorry.
Yeah, the question was about what you feel in the next year or two is the trend or development that we should be keeping a close eye on, because it would give us an opportunity to learn more about something important that's developing in this space.
Yeah, definitely. So I think there's quite a few things that have already been mentioned, but I think the first thing that's quite interesting to me is actually payments or mobile payments. And if I kind of look at Southeast Asia, where you have a huge population that's unbanked, so Indonesia, for example, 60% of the entire population is unbanked. Thailand, has a slightly smaller proportion, but still a fairly large one compared to the rest of the Western world. And if we look at the way digital assets operate, effectively you can send value to anyone through a wallet address, and you can do it fairly seamlessly, and in time to come, instantly, and then also at almost no cost, right? And so if we look at the traditional world whereby banks need to provide infrastructure to a lot of to the mass population in order for them to be banked, digital assets or the kind of the whole nature of digital assets basically cut through and makes everything far more efficient and cost effective. And so I think one of the kind of the short-term trend that I like to see is how can we start to really have financial inclusion in Southeast Asia, not through just the traditional TradeFi, but or kind of the neo banks, but rather how can crypto exchanges or platforms play a part in financial inclusion. So I think that's definitely the first one. The second one, of course, I think as I've already mentioned it, which is really interesting, is we are living in an endemic world. No longer pandemic, is endemic, and the fact is there will always be restrictions in place in terms of how we can interact from a physical location. And so I think that there's generally a shift for people to be more isolated or more geographically dispersed, right? More work from homes are going to be the norm now. So I think this interaction from a virtual perspective is really kind of important. And what I talked about is, the metaverse and also gaming. I think, how much time we've spent on our mobile phones, in front of our computers or our TV, I think has increased tremendously over the last 2 years. And so I think that trend there is like, how is that entire ecosystem and world is going to be built out? How do we, do online shopping anymore versus like how we've done it traditionally through a website? So I think that whole space is still very unclear at this point in time, but super, super interesting because there's so many, kind of really cool and innovative things that are coming out. For example, how brands are trying to interact with their own clients without having them to kind of physically be at the shop. So I think those are kind of like the two major trends. And I think the third one, kind of going back to, I guess for a lot of viewers, what are they kind of interested in? I think, we've seen, kind of the first phase of what, of cryptocurrencies and how people can invest in it. Now we've kind of looked at, tokenized assets or asset-backed tokens. And this space has been, like people have been looking at this space for the last 4 or 5 years. I remember back in 2017, people thought that, after cryptocurrency, security tokens was going to be the next wave. And now we are here in 2022 and still hasn't really quite taken off. I think, the reason why it hasn't quite taken off is because of regulation. That is probably the biggest impediment. So when we have kind of the right regulatory framework in place, these sorts of investments can thrive. In Thailand, for example, we start to see that, a natural real estate fund, Siri Hub, has actually raised, 70 to 80 million US dollars, through an ICO portal, right? So, ICO portal, but it's actually a security token. So that's actually really interesting because in Thailand and Indonesia, for example, they have no concepts of a REIT, whereas in Singapore, you have REITs. And this whole idea of fractional ownership of being able to buy part of a real estate asset is quite liberating for a lot of people because typically just they won't have the spending power to buy the entire asset itself. So I see this whole democratization of ownership, right, is really coming into fruition, and more and more things are going to be able to be fractionally owned.
Okay, Mr. Henry, I've got a question for you that's a little twist on this. So, if you have somebody who is, say, still in school, teen or tween, and you had to give them some advice about what is it that would be important for them to know as they are growing up into this space where the metaverse is going to be more of a mainstream thing, and what would you say is important for them to really look into when it comes to preparing for this future?
So technology, especially in the digital asset space, changes unbelievably quickly. And I think that's why I'd maybe quote two people. One, Mark Twain once said that, history never repeats itself, but it often rhymes. And two, Jeff Bezos famously once said that when they were building out Amazon, again, in a fast-moving tech environment, they try and focus on the things that don't change. Because if you focus on those, you can build for the long term. In Amazon's case, for example, people always want, larger product selection, lower prices, faster shipping, etc. So I would say someone in their tweens looking at the digital asset space, I'd encourage them to think in that lens. Again, rather than getting caught up necessarily in technology, which will be ever evolving, trying to drill into the basics and say, well, what is it that people want? I believe that everybody wants an opportunity to take their hard-earned money and invest it into assets that actually give them a productive return. And increasingly, people are going to want to be able to invest into companies where they actually feel like I am part of that company. Like I am not just a stakeholder company, but I can be a shareholder too. And those two things are interlinked. And again, I would tell someone, focus on what it is that the technology can deliver against actual customer needs instead of just getting caught up in the tech. And if you can do that and you can continue to iterate and deliver and innovate, I think you'll do just fine. Not just, in terms of making sure you're on the right technology trends, but also within a company. Right? I think all of us here in this virtual panel, we run young startups, young companies. I talk a lot to university students, for example, and I always tell them the same thing, which is if you can be a hardworking problem solver, someone who can help a company figure out how to innovatively deliver value against your customer needs, you will do just fine.
Okay, thank you very much. That's a great answer, Mr. Henry. Mr. Nischel, do you have anything that you would like to add to that?
Well, I just want to say that I appreciate hearing about those two quotes. Building with an eye towards things that don't change certainly is very good advice. And look, and it's not just very good advice, but it's very relevant advice because we are what we are seeing now in the crypto markets probably is not going to be. It's not going to be forever, right? definitely the space is currently very hot. A lot of investor interest is coming into the space. And, one might say that there could be a lot of capital right now flowing into too few ideas, right? So perhaps to somebody starting a career in crypto in this environment, it would be very good to focus on building really valuable skills in a role or in a sector that probably will be here forever. Obviously, all of us here are exchanges, right? So we do have our biases for sure. But having been in the markets throughout my career, I also do know how fast the weather can change, right? So probably focusing on developing real skills in business development, in management, in marketing, and everything might actually be a better use of one's early stage career rather than maybe thinking of cash grab opportunities and let's issue our own token and that kind of stuff.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Nichelle Gaba, from founder and CEO of PDAX Philippines. Thank you, Mr. Henry Chong, CEO of Fusang Malaysia Hong Kong, and also thank you to Mr. Marcus Lim, CEO and co-founder of ZipMex Singapore, who unfortunately is not with us right now. We really appreciate your time and your kindness in sharing your experiences and insight into where digital assets are heading, what to keep an eye out for, and what's exciting on the horizon. So thank you very much for your time. We really do appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. All right, so as we've heard now from our experts who are all leading founders of exchanges here in the Asia region, there is a lot of growth happening in the digital space, in digital assets, not only in the value of these assets, but also in the way that they're being applied. And it would be a great idea for us to keep an eye on how these new digital assets are going to be affecting our lives. So we are ready to start the next section where we will be focusing on the regulatory aspects of digital assets. Now, following the exponential increase in cryptocurrency trading, investment, and use, regulators are starting to ratchet up their monitoring of these digital assets. How's to settling and striking a balance between digital assets and legal obligations? Our prominent speakers will be speaking about and debating on the topic of digital assets, safe and sensibly regulated. Our speakers today are Kun Gorn Jatikawaniit, former Minister of Finance and founder of the Thai FinTech Association. We also have Kun Thawatchai Pithiasopon, Assistant Secretary General Legal for the Security and Exchange Commission of Thailand. Mr. Chia Hok Lai, Co-Chairman of the Blockchain Association in Singapore and CEO of SwitchNovate. And Kun Jirayut Sapsi Sopa, founder and group CEO of BitCup Capital Group Holdings Company Limited. Welcome everybody. My name is Jack and it's my honor to be the MC for this virtual forum. Thank you very much for the honor of attending this Nation Forum. We now have us with us here a government operator, provider, an issuer, and we have the opportunity to discuss this issue from multiple perspectives. So I'd like to start with Kun Thawatchai, the Assistant Secretary General Legal of the Security and Exchange Commission of Thailand, which is an operator. What is the status of regulatory reforms as of the present moment in terms of simultaneously safeguarding consumers and service providers?
Thank you, Khun Jack. Let me start with this. And you will see that we have the development law about the regulations on this digital asset. And that's because the industry moves so fast. And when we look at the international practices and law, we will see other jurisdictions, they change and they introduce new law to deal with this kind of issue as well. And you can see that in the short term, we're trying to raise the protection for the investor in terms of the put some kind of business conducts that for the business operators to keep pace with the changes. For example, you see the proposals to change the law on the advertisement, and this on the public hearing, because we see that this kind of issue would be very important to be addressed. And on the wrong land, you will see the last year we proposed the amendment to the Securities and Exchange Act as well. That's to change the landscape of the supervisions that we're trying to achieve the digital assets, whereby the substance is like securities to the Securities and Exchange Act. Because if it is like the securities, it is supposed to be regulated as a securities, but you will not see it in the very short term, because the proposing the amendment to the law will take some time, and it's not the thing that we should expect in the very recent years. And apart from that, we also proposed the change on the Securities and Exchange Act to allow the existing digital asset operators to participate in the securities law arena as well. As you see, once we shift this digital asset from the digital asset law to the securities regulations, we can't just leave the operators there. We have to open for them to apply for the license for securities trading center as well. And that's how they could, continue their business as the operators for the products that have been changed from the supervisions under the digital asset law to the securities regulations. Well, I will stop here. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Chia, can you tell us in what the regulatory situation is in Singapore in comparison? Is there anything that you would see that compares or contrasts with Thailand's?
Yeah, I think the regulations in Singapore and Thailand are quite similar. So in Singapore, the regulator will categorize the token, whether is it the payments token, securities token, or utility tokens. So if it is a payments token, which the majority of the cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin, Ethereum falls under this category, they are licensed under the Payments Services Act, which came into effect in January 2020. But if it's securities in nature, like it's like a debt or it has equity rights, then it's regulated under the Securities Futures Act. But if it is the utility in nature, for example, most non-fungible tokens are digital collectibles and art. Those are utility in nature. They are not regulated. But having said that, the regulator, the Monetary Authority of Singapore, has stated many times that they will look at the actual substance of the token rather than looking at how the market player labels it. So if it walks like a duck, quack like a duck, it is a duck. So those are the things that are quite clear in Singapore.
Okay.
Thanks.
One of our previous speakers from Singapore, he mentioned that Singapore was looking at taxing sales of NFTs.
Yes, that has been mentioned recently. So basically, it's like a sales tax in Singapore. So sales tax are applicable. However, in Singapore, there's no capital gains tax. Having said that, if you trade NFTs for a living, is your full-time job, right? then the income tax will apply. So that's the tax regulation now for NFTs. In contrast to cryptocurrencies, there's no sales tax. Yeah.
Okay. Kun Korn, you have a unique perspective as a former finance minister of Thailand, but also as the founder of the Thai FinTech Association. What are your thoughts on how digital assets should be regulated, especially with the current state of digital assets, tokenization, and cryptocurrency? Sorry, Kun Korn, I think your microphone may be muted.
Yeah, my apologies.
No problem.
My apologies. Yeah, I was just saying that I come from 20-year background of being in the equities business, in the securities business. And throughout that period, worked with the SEC since its formation in its regulatory approach to the securities industry. And I see a lot of similarity in mindset of what the SEC is trying to do with the crypto world. But there are some critical differences, which I think means that the SEC should need to account for. But first of all, the control of the local securities industry is easier simply because there are boundaries. The local market trades locally listed securities, which cannot be traded elsewhere. So it's quite easy to basically control what the activities of investors in the local market do. The big difference with the crypto market is the opportunity for local investors, local traders, to choose to trade elsewhere through an unregulated exchange. And that makes it really quite tricky, I think, for the regulators, because they may want to impose certain controls and certain restrictions on local exchanges. But all that typically means is that investors are turned off by trading through a regulated local exchange and instead direct their investments through unregulated foreign exchanges, which I think is a net loss for the Thai crypto industry or the ecosystem. So that poses a particular challenge. And so my view is that regulators should perhaps tread carefully in terms of trying to impose their will onto an industry which they can't fully control. And I think they have to admit the fact that they can't fully control it. And attempting to do so may basically just be pushing activities offshore or underground, which I don't think is beneficial to anybody. And I think that is the major challenge.
Okay, thank you very much. Kun Tirayut, BitCub is a service provider here in Thailand. Now, having heard that, I'm sure you have some ideas or recommendations, if you could offer what you feel like would be helpful in a regulatory situation. What do you think is the most concerning aspects of doing business on these digital asset trading platforms, and how do you think regulators could view the way to approach putting some restrictions on it that are not going to strangle the development of these exchanges?
Sure. First of all, thank you very much for inviting me to this talk. I have always been saying that BitCub is not a financial company, and at the same time, BitCub is not a technology company. I've been stating from day one that BitCub Group is a fintech group of companies, right? We cannot move fast and break things like Facebook as a tech company because we hold a lot of customers' assets. We cannot take crazy risks, right? But at the same time, we cannot move too slow like a financial company because we are living in a very different world now. We are living in a digital world. The world is not moving in a linear manner anymore. The world is moving in an exponential manner, right? Those that can see the next S-curve, next opportunity could bring tremendous growth to the country. Innovation has to be one of the main country's KPIs and metrics going forward, pretty much every nation. So I think, the vision is to make sure that either, private companies or the regulators see this industry as a fintech space, right? Not, too extreme on either end. We need to find the right balance between being moving fast and breaking things and being compliant and investors protection. Right? So this is, finding the sweet spot between the old, making sure the old world is happy with KYC, AML, account verifications, investor protection, but at the same time, we cannot temper growth with too much restriction. Cannot forcing too much regulation. In a way, forcing local players to bring a knife to a gunfight, right? With foreign players. Otherwise, we'll lose competitive advantage, and eventually the share of world trade would be reduced for Thailand, and as a result, we won't be capturing on the next S curve in the next decade. The arrival of Web3. So I guess the key is to find the right balance and making sure that for every regulations that comes out, we think through looking through from different angles, from different dimensions, making sure that we seek advice from various stakeholders to find the right a balance between. I guess the key is not to go for one particular KPI. We have to aggregate all the KPIs and make sure that we take one step back. Each take one step back and make sure we have a global country's KPI that is best for the country. To make sure that we have to have this conductor, making sure that the musician plays the same songs. I guess that's the key, and making sure that the regulation can adapt really fast, very flexible, because the world is changing very fast. Technology is developed very fast, so the regulations has to be able to adapt very fast. Also, thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Khun Jerayut. Khun Thawatchai, if we take digital assets and divide them into, say, 3 categories of cryptocurrencies, securities, and utilities, could you give us an idea, broadly speaking, of how you think that they should be regulated and how they should be separated, if possible?
Well, I think to answer this question, I'd like to lay down the principle of the regulations under the, I could say, Thai DA law. And this law is modeled after the Securities and Exchange Act of 1992. And we separated the supervision into 3 main parts. And the first one is the fundraising that is applicable to the digital tokens. That means the issuers that want to raise funds to the issuance of the digital tokens, that's comprising the investment tokens and utilities token, which is not offered the ready to use in the exchange to acquire the goods and services or any other rights, need to be approved by the SEC. And the information disclosure must be made to the filing of the registration statement and prospectus. You can see that when I mentioned it, it's pretty much the same as the rules apply to the offering of the securities, because the substance of these digital assets is similar to the securities that I mentioned earlier, that in the future, we're going to move these kind of assets to the Securities and Exchange law in the future. And that's the first part. And the second part is the supervision on the business operators. That includes the broker, dealer, exchange, fund manager, and investment advisor. These operators need to be obtained a license from the finance minister. And to be qualified to obtain the license, they have to have the proper, fit and proper directors, senior management, and they have to have the system in place, to use for the business operations. And after obtaining the license, they have to comply with the conduct of business. That's pretty much for the summary. And the last part would be the provision and the prevention of the unfair trading practices, which is also modeled after the Securities and Exchange Act, because although the products are different, but the fundamentals to supervise the order markets to to let the investor have the confidence through trading in the digital asset exchange need to be regulated as well. And that's we are talking about the false dissemination, market manipulation, and insider trading. That will be in short for the framework, and you will see that how we operated under the Thai DA law. When talking about the difference between the type of the digital assets, I talked about the digital tokens already, but the other type is the cryptocurrency. And this kind of digital asset is not subject to the provision of the fundraising because its nature is not supposed to be used to raise fund. But for the business operator that would like to deal with this cryptocurrency, need to have the license as well. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so Mr. Chia, how do we balance safe and sensible regulations, especially when we have a lot of providers and investors who are concerned about fairness and safety?
Yeah, I would like to quote a phrase given by the managing director of the Monetary Authority of Singapore in 2016 when Singapore embarked on our ambition to become a leading fintech hub. So he mentioned three things. First, regulations should not front-run innovation. But that means that regulators should not be too eager to start regulating a new innovation before it has a chance to nurture itself. The second principle is that the regulators should keep abreast of what is happening in the industry and be ready to regulate once a risk becomes material. For example, cryptocurrency trading volume in Singapore is only less than 2% of traditional equities. In terms of derivatives, it's less than 1%, and only 0.1% of the funds manage any kind of cryptocurrency fund. So there is no systemic risk to the financial stability. However, there might be a material risk in terms of money laundering and terrorist financing, which is why the current Payment Services Act focus on the money laundering part. And the third principle is what we call as the proportionality test. Basically, when we decided to regulate, right, the regulatory intensity should be proportionate to the kind of risk. We should not be, for example, using a banking regulation to regulate a digital asset exchange because the kind of risk they present is very different. Last but not least, I think the other way to manage this is really through the use of regulatory sandbox. In fact, in Singapore, we have 3 regulatory sandbox, a standard one, an express version, and a recently introduced one called the Sandbox Plus. And that Sandbox Plus is targeted at new innovations like decentralized finance. So I think this is a good way to manage both innovation and risk. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Chia. And Kun Korn, I'd love to hear your perspective on this as far as how we can balance the needs of protecting investors and providers while at the same time allowing for these new industries and areas to grow.
Yeah, I thought that was a very interesting Singapore perspective. I remember very well hearing those 4 mantras back in 2016. And I think Singapore's struck a nice balance so far. And furthermore, I'd like to say that when we formed the Thai FinTech Association, it was very much with the view that the industry, the FinTech industry, needs to work closely and hand in hand with regulators. It's important that the industry, because anything to do with finance, the most important thing is trust. And the best way of earning trust of the public is for you to be properly regulated by an acknowledged regulator. And so that's one thing. But getting that balance right, especially in a very fast-moving new sector such as the crypto sector, is definitely a challenge. My view, broadly speaking, I think to be honest, that the regulators have to quote the Singapore term, front run development a little bit, and I think have gotten a little ahead of themselves, overzealous a little bit in trying to regulate something that is still very much emerging. The tax issue is a case in point. I just think we're maybe 2 or 3 years into crypto trading, and already the regulators are taxing capital gains when in fact they're not even really very ready as to how to go about fairly taxing everybody in an equitable manner. There's still obvious loopholes for Thai investors to be investing, for example, in an overseas exchange that is unregulated by both the securities regulator and the tax authorities, thus making it very unfair to those investors who stick by with the local exchanges that are regulated in terms of tax treatment. So one has to ask the question, the equity market in Thailand is still, after 30 or 40 years since its launch, still exempted from capital gains tax. So why such a hurry to tax crypto, which as a percentage of the overall financial sector is still so small? Why don't we just see how things flow, see how things grow before making that decision? My view is that this overzealousness comes a little bit from a sense of caution and a sense of fear of this new sector. I think traditional regulators are just a little bit afraid of what is clearly an unknown to them. Regulators don't like unknowns, and the crypto sector is a big unknown. And so to that extent, instead of giving it space and letting and seeing how things grow, they decide to clamp down too early. And I think that's a negative. That's a very good reason why equities are exempt of capital gains taxes, because the equity markets and the development of equity markets is deemed to be important to the overall development of the economy. Well, I think I can argue, and I think a lot of people in the technology sector will argue that cryptos and blockchain will be equally, if not more important, to the development of future economies, and to allow this sector to grow and to prosper is of long-term benefit to the country, and thus arguably should be given the same tax treatment as the equity market has always been and still is today. So that's my broad view.
Okay, thank you, Khun Gon. Khun Jirayut, do you agree with this viewpoint, and do you have anything to add with regards to your perspective as a fintech company of how the current trend of regulatory environment in Thailand compared to the markets that may be unregulated or less regulated overseas?
Sure. As Khun Gon was saying earlier, this market is connected globally, and there's no friction to move the network effect elsewhere. Right? There's no barriers to entry. So a country with too much restriction would push innovations to occur elsewhere. But at the same time, with too little restriction, then there will be scams. Investors won't be fully protected. So I guess we have to find the right balance. And I also agree with Khun Gon on the other point in that cryptocurrency and blockchains, they are really the digital infrastructure for the digital economy, for Web3, right? The arrival of Web3, that's going to have a huge impact on the Thai economy in the next decades. Right now, the digital economy in Thailand is accounted for 17% of country's national GDP in 2017, right? But most of the GDP are created from foreign companies. We have the likes of e-commerce businesses, social media apps and sharing apps, ride-sharing apps, hotel sharing apps. Those are foreign, ownerships, service providers in Thailand, accounting for 17%. And Thailand has been, relying on the tourism space as our heavy, weighted. I think 20% of the Thai's GDP came from tourism space. And then after COVID, the tourism space accounted for only 2%. Right, so we need to find the next growth for the next decade for the future of Thailand to escape this middle income trap. And the right metrics to measure for the country as a whole is not GDP. I don't think that's a true representation, because most of the digital economy created in the past were foreigners, and they're not really contributing taxation or giving values back to the country. I think the more accurate measurement is GNP, gross national product, and digital economy should be accounting for at least 50% of GNP in the next decade. And most of the GNP in Thailand would come from digital economy. And in order for digital economy to foster, to grow, we need a strong digital infrastructure. Imagine in the past, without railways, without roads, there will be no logistic. Right? Logistic cannot occur without proper roads and railways, and or tollways, right? Or SMEs cannot grow in the past decades without banks or stock exchange being the physical infrastructure. Thailand became the Detroit of Asia in the previous decade, became amazing Thailand, top tourism destination in the last decade. But that's the past. The future focus of Thailand should be the digital hub of ASEAN. And in order to achieve that target, we need to have a strong digital infrastructure. And cryptocurrency, blockchain, NFTs, these are critical countries' infrastructure for the next wave of growth. And we should not temper it. We cannot do this premature intervention. We should allow infrastructure to grow. And it will create more opportunities for Thai people to build big new businesses on the new layer going forward.
Thank you. I'd like to give Kun Thawatchai a chance to respond to the opinions that have been expressed here from the side of a fintech company, as well as somebody who is the head of the Fintech Association of Thailand, about this concern that Thailand may be hobbling its own efforts to grow in the digital economy space. Of course, we are rightfully would be concerned about the opportunities for fraud in these markets, as they are in some people could describe it as the new wild, wild west, where there's a lot of unknowns and it's a big fog that people are navigating in, and some people are taking advantage of this lack of knowledge among the general public. And I'd like to ask you to respond to these concerns.
Right. Okay, thank you, Kun Jack. Thank you, Kun Goan and Kun Jirayut. And let me put it this way: the SEC value the development of the technologies and innovations, and our mission is to both promote and regulate the digital assets industry, and how to strike the right balance. I would say that we're trying to do this as well. But our aspect would be different, and we have to listen to all the stakeholders, and that's very true. I agree with that. But talking about the regulator's point of view, I think Kun Gon mentioned something about these issues already. But I try to explain this like this: we have to balance, in our view, development of investor protections and mitigation of the risk. And this is very important. I think we all agree with this kind of issues. But the thing is that we would view it in the different ways. So the way to solve this kind of thing, we have to talk about this. And what we value, the technologies you will see from our law and regulations, and I'm from the legal side. Maybe I'm talking about something that's the law because I'm a lawyer. But the thing is that we embrace the technology as well. You had heard of the projects that initiated by the SEC as to apply the digital infrastructures in the capital markets, and we are trying to use the technologies to help all the transaction in the capital markets on this platform, and from the fundraising, secondary markets, registrar, depository, investor service intermediaries, and it could be applied to the digital asset industry as well. So I don't know. My response is that how we can deal with this, we have to listen to each other. That's for sure. But that's very true. And I'd like to mention about our approach to issue the new regulations or propose the new amendments to the regulations or law as well. We also study from international law and in the many jurisdictions and practices, and we're trying to adapt the concepts that we study to that we think that would be fit for the Thai context. And lately, I think we work pretty closely with the TDO, and that could help. Let's see. Right now, you see we have post quite some public hearings on the amendments to our regulations, and we'll see how we could, working together on this issue. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Mr. Chia, could you give us some perspective on how in Singapore regulators and industry professionals have been working together on how to strike up that conversation about a sensible way forward with developing this regulatory environment?
Yeah, I think I agree with Khun Kon just now. He said that how the regulators could work closely with industry associations. I was a former and founding president for the Singapore FinTech Association, currently running the Blockchain Association. So we have been working quite closely with the regulators all the while. In fact, recently we have a roundtable with the regulators, especially for the digital asset space, which is still rapidly evolving, and there's a lot of unknowns out there. And I think this is where industry associations can prove to be very valuable, because they can let the regulators understand what are the market realities and practices. They can also help to preempt any implementation problems of any new regulations. They also can preempt any unintended consequences of regulations. And last but not least, by working closely with industry associations, they could foster industry understanding and gain support for the regulation. Then that will help in the implementation. So I've always postulated that just regulations is not enough. Working closely with the industry and sometimes letting the industry self-regulated, coming up with their own code of practices might be a better way to achieve managing the risk for the financial system and achieving consumer protection. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you. Khun Jirayut, can you tell us from your perspective if you've had opportunities to work with regulators on developing these frameworks?
Sorry, can you please repeat the question?
Sure, Khun Jirayut. I just wanted to ask, from your own experiences, have you had opportunities to work with regulators on advising or giving your perspective on what you feel is a good way forward to developing regulatory frameworks?
Personally, I haven't been having that opportunity to work closely with the regulators, but for the company, there are people from my team that joined the TDO. We have a self-regulated, association, Exchange Association of Thailand, called TDO, and they're working closely with the Thai regulators, trying to find the right balance and the regulations for Thailand. But it would be great if I could contribute more to the space, because I'm the longest person to be in this space for Thailand, and I've been through technology ups and downs for almost a decade now. So if I'm presented with the opportunity to help with the regulation, I would be more than happy to. But I guess going forward, with different regulators in Thailand, we should have a round table where the Bank of Thailand, the SEC, the RD, the private companies can come and share each of the local KPIs, and making sure we understand each other and we bridge the communication gap issues, and we see every facet, every dimension before we launch a new regulations or sandbox in Thailand, to make sure that we have a global nation's best KPI out. Making sure that all the musician plays the same song. We need a round table, a conductor. I think going forward, that would be the best case. Thank you.
Khun Thawatchai, do we have any kind of regulatory sandboxes with digital assets in Thailand?
Oh, it would be allowed, but we have to look through this, because on the traditional market, we have the regulations allow for the sandbox already, but not yet in the digital asset arena. We could talk about that, but the thing is that I think the best way to do this is to work closely, and we have the collaborations, and we could listen more about it, and we can share the view from regulatory perspective. And as I mentioned earlier, we study from other jurisdiction as well, and we are not gonna say that we just can't shift shift some laws of other jurisdiction to apply totally in Thailand. But we have to make adjustment, and we have to listen to stakeholders as well. But at the policy level, we have to look through all the big pictures, because working as regulators, I know I would say it's not easy as well, because we deal with the conflicting demands from many stakeholders, and how to strike the right balance. I say this word again, and we try to do this as well. But maybe we look through these, things differently. Okay, thank you.
Is there, and I'll ask this for all of you, is there any plans to use the blockchains itself, because it's decentralized and trustless, that this technology itself could be used or applied to regulations, so that we could move forward using the advantages of this technology?
There's a lot of potential in government services, and I think that's the biggest potential area of improvement in efficiency through the use of this technology. People talk about land title deeds. People talk about even the voting systems. I think a lot of possibility, and that's why I very much feel that we need to let this grow. We need to let this area develop, including really attracting an interest by the general public in the technology. And so I think that's why, if there's any final comment I'd like to make, is the mood and tone of what the regulator does and say is important. It sort of sets the tone for the rest of the population in terms of what their attitude should be towards this new sector. So when recent regulatory announcements were made, for example, restricting advertisements of crypto exchange services, eyebrows were raised. We're used to regulation concerning IPOs and offering of securities, but we're not used to companies that provide the service being regulated from advertising their services. And when the regulatory announcement go into such detail as to even ban the usage of images of the managers or shareholders of the exchanges from being used in advertising, we're thinking, we're asking, what's going through the regulated minds here? Why that level of concern? And I think it sends out negative signals to the general public that people in charge just don't like this technology, and I don't think that's sort of helpful. I'm not against regulation at all, and I think protection of the public is an important task for the regulator, and I acknowledge that it's very difficult. But sending out the right signal, making sure that the public at least feel that the government and the regulators are positive towards the development of this new technology, but just be careful, is different from saying, "Hey, we don't like this, and we rather you guys go do this elsewhere rather than under our jurisdiction." So, it's that's what I'd say to the regulator if I had the chance.
Okay, Mr. Chia, could you give an example of how regulations or regulatory environments in this new era can be more responsive to the way that technology is changing and to the way that the financial environment is changing?
Yeah, so I think again, because changing or coming up with new regulations is hard. It's a multi-year process. So I think just now I mentioned, definitely regulatory sandbox is one good way. And then the other one is really about working very closely with the industry. And I think industry associations are a very good platform for that, because given that the digital assets is a very new industry, almost every day we see new things happening, right? Constantly working with the industry, and especially during the early stages, perhaps the industry could self-regulate, coming up with the code of conduct where everyone will abide to it, can in a way buy time for more sensible regulation to come into force, rather than just outright ban it, which again then don't support the innovation, and in the process it might cost the country economic growth and jobs. Yeah, and that's my view. Yeah.
How can you give a little bit more about if you did more self-regulation among the industry players? Can you give examples of if somebody overstepped their bounds or did something that was treading the line ethically? How would the industry police itself in this way?
So the industry will have to agree with that code of conduct, and then typically in terms of how you set up the governance process, then there will be a committee that will then agree that this particular player has crossed the red line, and then he will be somehow at the industry level, there will probably a kind of investor watch list. That will be in a way a good enough kind of punishment to me lah. Yeah, because in the industry watch list will not put it in a very positive light to their potential or even existing customers.
Okay, and is there any room for a customer level, not regulation but monitoring of the behavior of these players? So, in a sense, you have, for example, online websites where you can rate services, for example, for restaurants or hotels, and people can give their opinions based on what they've seen or their own personal experiences, and then the quality of these reviews can be compared to past reviews. So there's mechanisms to try to avoid biased reviews, for example. Is there any space for that?
I'm not too sure those mechanisms will be effective, because we also know that many of such mechanisms could be abused by the player itself and by the competitors also. Perhaps another way we can look at is really coming up with a whistleblowing kind of framework. Again, the investigation part can either be done at the industry association level or jointly together with the regulator. I thought those will be a more sensible way to do it. Of course, rating could be part and parcel of the entire thing, but I think solely relying on the consumer rating, I think there are still a lot of flaws unless we have very good ways to mitigate the kind of risk.
Okay, that's a good point. Khun Jirayut, do you have anything that you would say would be a very, if you had the chance to make a quick fix or something that you thought was an area that could be addressed relatively quickly to help the entire industry? Would you say there's any parts that, in your opinion?
I can hear the background noise.
Sorry, Khun Jirayut, can you hear me still?
Okay, please.
There's a crossed line.
Is there somebody else on the line? I don't hear anything on my side, but I'm sorry if you're hearing a little bit of cross talk on your side. The question to you again: do you feel like if you had an opportunity to approach the regulators and say,
I'm sorry, the admin, can we please stop?
Excuse me. I think there's. Can we get somebody to tell them to be quiet? Okay. All right. So, can I come back to Khun Thawatchai? What do you, in your opinion, what do you think would be something that on the regulatory side could happen relatively soon in trying to address these concerns?
Well, firstly, I think I'd like to respond to Khun Korn's comment as well, because I felt about the proposed amendment to the advertisement regulations, and we didn't propose the prohibition on the advertisement of the service of the business operators, and what we put some restriction on the advertisement in public arena is the cryptocurrency advertisement and cryptocurrency, and this is the only products that we proposed the restriction, because we studied it from the guideline on provision of the digital payment tokens of the Singapore that the MAS just imposed recently. So this is where it's come from, and I'd like to make clear that it is very. I agree that if we are going to propose the ban or restriction on the advertisement of the services of the business operator, it's not reasonable. That's why I think that it's not what we propose, and let me make it clear in this point. But thank you, Khun Korn, for raising, because I have a chance to respond to this. But to be honest, the proposal has been criticized in some other contents of it as well, because, for example, the pre-approved process for the advertisement that we proposed, and we will welcome the public comments and from the industry as well. So somebody proposed that whether or not we could deal with it by the SRO type, and whether or not we can allow the industry to do it by themselves. And I think we have to consider this kind of comments as well, and we'll see whether it's going to be possible, and whether or not we can make some adjustment on this. And anyway, that's what I like to address on this issue.
Okay, thank you. Can I go back to Khun Jirayut? I just wanted to ask you again the question about if you had an opportunity to raise an issue with the regulators that you felt was something that could be addressed relatively quickly, maybe even painlessly, to help the Thai market when it comes to the digital asset space. What issue do you think you would identify that could be looked at?
Sure. I think most of the regulated players are good in nature, good actors. We are fully transparent. Otherwise we won't be applying for the license, right? And most of the scams and the bad actors are the one unregulated, and all the illegal activities are happening underground. So I think it is important for the regulated players and the regulators work together to find the right balance, making sure that things are on ground. Finding the right balance, not not pushing all the activities underground, and that's going to be harder to control. We need to bring all the activities up on ground and make sure we can monitor, we can have all the data. We should act as a collective data point for the country and making sure we can control all the risk. And to do that, regulators and all the players must work together to make sure that the regulated players are not bringing like a knife to a gunfight, because otherwise, even the good actors are going to lose in the long run because of all the regulatory burden and all the activities, all the bad actors are still going to be happening anyways, but we can't really control them. Everything would be going underground. So I think the best advice, I think, on my end is to bridge this communication gap and also the mindset that we are actually the same team. We are trying to do the best for the industry, for the country, making sure we are trying to allow innovation to foster, but at the same time protecting investors, making sure that investors are fully educated, right, of how to store, fully keeping customers' assets safe, and making sure illicit activities are not happening on the platform, and being able to monitor and collect the data point for the country. So we are actually the same team and trying to find the right balance for the country. Otherwise, if we cannot, combine the two forces together and trying to, only punish or regulate the transparent ones, all the illicit activities are going to happen regardless, but they're going to happen in an underground manner that nobody can collect the data point for the country, nobody can control, and investors are not going to be protected anyways, especially overseas, right? Where we can't really trace or talk to the operators overseas. It's boundaryless, it's borderless now. The internet, there's no friction to move the innovations outside of Thailand or the illicit activities outside of Thailand. So my suggestion would be to share that we are actually the same team, trying to find the best solutions for the country, and making sure we launch something that is really best for the country, and finding the right balance. We're a fintech company. We're not a financial company, or we're not a tech company. We are not moving fast and breaking things like Facebook. We fully understand this because we have a lot of customers. Assets, right? Not like Facebook, they can move fast and break things. But at the same time, we also need to look at innovation as another country's KPI now, as the next S-curve for the country to foster with the digital economy coming up in the next decade, right? And we cannot move too slow. We are not a financial company either. We need to think of the industry as a fintech space, right? Finding the right balance between financial and tech as a whole.
Khun Chia, can I come back to you and ask you, can you address the challenge that might be where your regulators may not have all of the information that the front line, which is the industry players, have, and that as things are changing, they may not be digesting the information of these new developments as quickly as the industry players? And how do you foster the communication between regulators and the industry players so that everyone's on the same page? Khun Chia?
Oh, the question is for me, is it?
Yes, sorry.
Yeah, I think once a player is regulated, there are certain reporting requirements. So I think those things are important for the regulator to understand what is happening. But it's also equally important that the regulators themselves to have the competency and the capability to independently verify those numbers. And the good thing about blockchain is that a lot of these transactions are on-chain, which means that to a certain extent and with the right tools, which currently a lot of tools are available, then that will form a very good the surveillance framework for them. Basically, the regulatory requirement for reporting and the ability to independently verify those numbers.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Mr. Chia. Thank you to all of our panelists, Kun Korn Jatikawanish, former Minister of Finance and founder of the Thai FinTech Association, Kun Thawatchai Pithiasopon, Assistant Secretary General Legal of the Securities and Exchange Commission Thailand, Mr. Chia Hok Lai, Co-Chairman of the Blockchain Association of Singapore and CEO of SwitchNovate, and Kun Jirayut Sapsi Sopa, founder and group CEO of BitCup Capital Group Holdings Company Limited. We really do appreciate your time and your insight into sharing or shedding some light onto this very exciting new space that is going to become more and more a part of our lives. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. สวัสดีครับ
สวัสดีครับ
All right. Wow, that was really interesting to hear the perspectives of
our speakers.
Yeah, our speakers who are both on the, the government regulatory side and also on the industry side, and see, what they see as the challenges and how this industry space is developing. And it's hopefully will continue to offer opportunities for Thailand to become a leader in this industry space.
Oh, sorry. Okay, so we now move on to the final sessions featuring some very knowledgeable speakers on the subject, exploring digital asset ecosystems and journey now and next. And so we have our speakers, Mr. Sanjay Popley, the CEO and co-founder of the CryptoMine, Ms. Jitinan Chatsiharat, CEO of TokenX, Mr. Chung Ying Lai, Chief Strategy Officer from Indonesia. And for the last sessions, I'll be the moderator to handle this.
Take it away, Kun Nina.
Sawadika and welcome all three speakers. My name is Nina Nirashamalisaklami and thank you for joining our The Nations Forum Digital Assets. Sawadika speakers, can you hear me?
Yes, all good.
Yes.
ครับสวัสดีครับ
สวัสดีค่ะ
Sawadika. So let's the discussions begin. First, I would like to start with Kun Jittinan. What is the missions and visions of your company and your latest movement?
Okay, let me introduce like TokenX. TokenX is the ICO portal company under license from SEC, and our vision is to powering the next generations of digital economy, elevated financial accessibilities, and bring opportunity to everyone. So we act as a bridge to bring people from traditional world into like digital finance. So we have like end-to-end solutions for tokenization. So we can help the company to issue all type of tokens, investment tokens, utility tokens, or even like NFT. So our recent project that we just launched is the NK token, which is the utility token of the girl groups franchise from Japan. Yeah, that's a development.
What about you, Kun Sanjay? Would you like to introduce your company, please?
Hi, my name is Sanjay. I'm the CEO of CryptoMine Advisory. So I'm the co-founder of CryptoMine Group as well. So under CryptoMine Group, we have a couple of entities. So CryptoMine Advisory is focusing on research, consulting with company, bringing them on board to the digital asset world. And also we got the digital asset investment consultant license. And we have another entity called Merkle Capital, which is one of the first regulated digital asset fund management here. So overall, we are having our total asset under management right now is $40 million US, so around 1,400 million baht. Yeah.
And last, we have Mr. Chong. What is the missions and visions of your company and your latest movement and development?
Hello, my name is Chong Ying. You guys can call me Ying. I'm the CSO and co-founder of Toko Crypto, the largest and licensed exchange in Indonesia. So I would say the mission vision will be bringing crypto legitimate in the country, that's why we started on as the Toko Crypto Exchange, which serves as the gateway for Indonesians to enter the cryptocurrency world. And then now we are focusing on building the ecosystem with our NFT marketplace, with our incubations program and accelerator program with BI Ventures, and also coming up with our own IPO launchpad and also NFT series. So now the next few years, we will be very focusing on the ecosystem building within the Indonesia area. Thank you.
Okay. So I would like to ask Sanjay, you are now in Dubai right now, live from Dubai, right?
Yep.
So you're joining the Blockchain Week 2022. Could you please tell us the atmosphere and how are things going right there?
Things are pretty buzzing in Dubai. So I got a chance to speak to a couple of regulators here and people in charge here. So for Dubai itself, they wanted to establish themselves as one of the Web 3.0 hub in the world today. So it's pretty interesting to see people globally from China, US, UK, Europe, Asia as well, moving and having some sort of operation presence here. With the regulation that they're having, they want to attract a lot of global players to build a new industry over here in Dubai. And their regulation is quite, I think, flexible. That's the way to put it. And I think from talking to the people here, a lot of people have moved here permanently and set up a base here. And attending this event, I think there's a couple of thousand of people, got to meet people from all over the world, whether they're doing a project, exchanges, fund, security firm. So many things interesting going on here at the moment. And I think there's the conferences they have. I think they have a couple of conferences every other week. So it's an interesting place for people to come network, meet each other, and share collaboration and ideas. Yeah. So atmosphere is very good, I would say. Yeah. Finally, good to get out of Thailand. After 2 years.
Anything interesting that would benefit Thailand?
I think the way they set up the regulation here is more on a sandbox model, and they want to establish a pretty strong operation industry over here. So apart from that, I think they have some concern as well with the AML and investor protection. But I think it's very good for the local economy. They can attract a lot of big players in. Couple of big companies has set up a license exchange here, getting some sort of license, establish themselves as an operation hub. So maybe Thailand can take a look at some of these models for us to be able to attract some of the global players as well. Because I believe if we are able to attract some of the global player, the local player would benefit from all of this as well, with all the talent coming in, the collaboration work coming in, and setting up as a ecosystem and a hub in Southeast Asia is quite an interesting possibility, I would say.
Well, talking about Southeast Asia, I would like to ask Mr. Chung. So Token Crypto, your company is the top-ranked digital asset platform. What is the situation in a country with a nearly 300 million populations, and how are the digital assets being adopted right there in Indonesia?
So I would say that currently, over the last few years, right, crypto has actually grown very big in Indonesia. So it's like from 2019 to 2022, we have seen like almost 100-fold growth in the number of crypto asset traders. And currently our numbers stand around 2 million registered account, about 100 to 200K active weekly traders. So among this group of users, a lot have actually been the Gen Z of like 20 plus to 30 years old from what we see in our platform. And actually, crypto asset in Indonesia has become like a sort of lifestyle and the go-to preference for investment of these younger generations. And recently, especially about the NFT boom, Indonesia being a creative hub as per se since the olden days. Like Indonesia have a lot of artists, a lot of like creative talents. And I think this NFT boom actually matches well with the talents that Indonesia have. And from there, you see actually a lot of NFT projects like Carrefour, Arex Saga has actually been coming from Indonesia. All of those are Indonesia, Game5, and NFT projects. So this is how the situation in Indonesia has been picking up for crypto asset and NFT over the last 1 and 2 years.
How do you see this trend would expand within ASEAN?
In terms of ASEAN-wise, I think regulation point of view is definitely one of the main areas to focus on, because at the end of the day, right, for the citizens to be able to join in like the DeFi ecosystem, the NFT ecosystem, exchange will need to be there to be the gateway. And currently, exchange, I would say, is the center point of all the regulation across ASEAN. On Indonesia side, I would say that the regulation has been quite flexible. We have been actively engaging the regulator since 2017-2018, and we became the first one who got licensed in Indonesia. And that actually triggers a very good momentum for the country, where I think currently, as of now, there's about 20 exchanges that receive the registration license from Bapepti, which is under the Minister of Trade as a commodity. So I believe to mimic the boom that we are seeing in ASEAN, and similar to what is being seen in Indonesia, the exchange part will need to be the first mover, and from there, the different citizens of the ASEAN countries will then be able to access the ecosystem through DeFi, through NFTs, and through Game5. Because without the exchange, honestly, there's a lot of limitations on the accessibility of all this ecosystem for the crypto asset and other NFTs ecosystem.
Kun Jitinan, would you like to add something to this? Hello? Kun Jitinan,
Sorry ค่ะ yeah
Can you hear me
yeah I'm so sorry about technical problem yeah right now I hear you yeah
Okay, would you like to add something to what Mr. Chang said towards this digital asset trends within ASEAN regions?
Yeah, I think it starts with Thailand first. I think in market in Thailand for cryptocurrency is well adopted. But once we talk about like investment tokens or utility token, it's relatively new to the market. There are only like a very few like use case for investment tokens for Thailand because there's still like having a hurdle in relation to like VAT or VAT perspective to be able like for the issuer to launch effectively into the market for investment tokens and also for the understanding of investor as well, whether it's like kind of cryptocurrency or it's like token with underlying. And that's the perspective for the investment token. And for utility token, I think issuer or trier or like developer is trying to like find a unique or find a benefit of launching a utility token. But I would say the regulations in Thailand is still like unclear for like both investment and utility. And I think similar to like the previous speaker say, like NFT is very boom in Thailand and Southeast Asia as well, and also for like GameFi. Yeah.
Well, digital assets can be divided into 3 categories, which are currencies, securities, and utilities. How do you see these 3 evolving together? I would like to start with Kun Sanjay ค่ะ
I would probably say for me, I think all of that will kind of converge. Like for me personally, I don't like to like mix or divide it into like different category. It's just a use case. I'm more focusing on the use case of the token itself. So whether it's like some of you might call it as a cryptocurrency, like a Bitcoin, Litecoin, Ripple. Each of them have potentially other use case in the future as well, right? So I would limit it to just for as a part of like cryptocurrency stuff. But I think like for the future, right? I think we are seeing a lot of security firm exploring asset tokenization model. So something similar to might be a single asset REIT or a bond, corporate bond into like move it to a digital asset. Also some commodity, even though like gold, silver, copper, or even like a livestock. So there's a lot of couple of different model that people are exploring this at the moment. And potentially with NFT as well, right? Like people can actually own something which they clearly own and can monetize on it as well. So we will see at this stage, right? We will see the crypto industry exploring new business model that are unheard of in the past, like how we had the new business model of like Uber, Airbnb back in those days, right? So I think we will see a lot of new business model from play to earn, learn and earn, move to earn. So there's a lot of things as well that can be done, right, in this future. So I think future is a bit unclear, but I think we see some part in it. And also there will be convergence between like security, asset back, even the DeFi world, right? They have to come link up with the CeFi world anyway. I feel like, yeah. So these two cannot be separated forever, right? So it'll be interesting to see as well how things turn out and how things converge together as a whole.
Kun Jitinan คะ How do you see these 3 things evolving together?
Like Kun Sanjay mentions, I think for the like if talking specifically for investment token, I think people trying to explore because for tokenization you can tokenize anything that have value. So we do expect that people will trying to see like a variety of underlying or variety of asset or project to be backed the token, and also like a wide variety of like compensation scheme that they plan to pass through the value to the investors, whether it's like revenue sharing, whether it's like bonus, whether it's like fixed revenues. I think it's wide variety of like use case or scheme that they are planning. And yeah, I do agree with Kun Sanjay that there will be like a thin line between investment and utility, because like we can see like some utility or some investment that have like both feature in the same token. So that's yeah, I think that's a trend right now. Yeah.
What about you, Mr. Chong Ying?
For me, I actually see what is the trend now, right? Is the regulators trying to separate these three different tokens under different regulation, because it's like, for example, utility tokens and asset-backed tokens that's non-stable coin are actually more towards under the Minister of Trade. Then if you are talking about securities token, it's more towards like the Minister of Finance or SEC in US case point of view. And utility token will also be under Ministry of Trade, and stable coin will be under the bank, National Bank. But I agree with what Sanjay mentioned just now. Most probably towards in the future, right, there will be a lot of hybrid model between how the tokens is being designed. Like a simple reference that we can do now is the DAO. Currently, a lot of the tokens that's being released are the DAO model. But DAO, if we going through the idea of DAO, is basically giving voting rights to the token holders. So is this part of the utility token, or is this part of a security? So I think all these are the questions that is coming up, where regulators will have to face it and really come into understanding that this might be something new that's being designed, and it's hard to really categorize it fundamentally under any regulators as of now. So this is something I feel that has to be viewed as a brand new idea and a brand new category. Yeah.
Okay. So digital assets are on blockchain technology, and what is the development now, and how secure will it eventually be, Kun Sanjay?
So I think we are at a bit of like, since I've been in this industry since 2017, I've seen a couple of developments. So back in those days, a lot of projects were still fundraising without an actual product. So those we call it the initial coin offering boom. So people were raising like a couple of 10 to like 20 or $50 million without any real product. So that actually was the actual scary part. But then as we move on within this industry, right, we had a lot of 0 to 1 innovation came up. First of all, with the DeFi in 2019-20, started off with couple of $10 million. Now we are like $200 billion like market cap, or like TVL, or like total value locked in the DeFi space. So you can see the growth even in DeFi itself, right, is humongous, like for like the past 2-3 years that has happened. At the same time, you've seen a lot of adoption for the crypto space. User in Thailand back in 2018 was around 100,000 people. Now we are more than 2 million. Expecting to grow to even like 5 to 10 million, I think within 1 or 2 years for sure. Crypto is not about only investment only, right? So right now, the trend that we're seeing, like even traditional VC have mandate to invest in digital asset related company, whether you are building infrastructure model, whether you're doing NFT, fan related engagement, GameFi related. So there's a lot of new innovation being developed as we speak. But right now, I think like there's a lot of new money coming in, especially from the traditional VC. We can see a lot of, and the other trend we are seeing is a lot of M&A as well globally. You're going to see bigger exchanges, whether from the global perspective, start coming into new frontier market, right? Whether they come into like do it themselves or M&A or JV with an existing company. And apart from that, I also see the trend that, first of all, like back in those days, a lot of things were about speculation and investment only. Now we are talking digital asset, not only on that part, where we have things related to fan related, artists creating NFT, being able to monetize on their art, gamer being able to monetize on their time, owning the real value of their asset, being able to actually sell their item in the game that they actually own. Lifestyle, other thing is like profile picture. People start building community around certain group of picture they own. So I think like a lot of new development coming in. At the same time, right? This is going to be another frontier, right, on how we're going to move to the next innovation batch of the digital asset era. So I think like a lot of traditional financial company also, they have to take this seriously now. Global company are coming in for sure, and then like so I expect this to grow to be even higher, I think. And I didn't even mention about metaverse yet, and the new Web3 perspective as well. Yeah.
So that's how we need to create the sustained ecosystems. Therefore, my questions would be, how can digital assets create the ecosystem for business, and in which way, Kun Sanjay ka?
So for business, I think I spoke to a lot of companies as well. Traditionally, they want to enter the space. A lot of them, the most time, what I would recommend to them is to have like an open experimental mindset, because to be completely honest, even you ask anyone, right, no one actually know, right, how you can monetize on some of the things we talk about, right? But we see kind of the framework where it will be going. So the important thing is to get into the bandwagon first, start with very small step, right? Have some proof of work concept, then slowly scale your result out, and then slowly pivot it to whatever you think might work well with the market. So we are seeing a lot of traditional businesses from retail store, artists coming in, building their own space, create engagement with the fan, with the metaverse concept. A lot of potential are being unlocked at this moment in time. So I think you have to come in with an open mindset and not look at the ROI currently. That's very important, right? So you're investing something at this moment for the future, and to create a new future business model, I would say on that part. Yeah.
What about you, Kun Jitinan? How can digital... Please go ahead.
Okay, for the ecosystem, right? I think for blockchain, blockchain can create like a new business model or a new asset class. But with the new business models, I think certainly with new business model, there will be new community and new ecosystem built up for a new use case that created. And come back to like an existing company, they also can use this digital asset to create their community or ecosystem as well. Because for example, if they issue investment token repeatedly, and then they just create a community of investor, they just create the ecosystem of the group of investor. And for the utility token, for a company that issue utility tokens, using it as an engagement or royalty program, and then they are building a community, or they are building the engagement between fans of their product and service. Yeah, I think that there's a wide variety of way of building the community or ecosystem by using digital assets.
And for you, Mr. Chong Ying?
For me, I would say that crypto and Web3, I would say that it can have a very good reference towards the Web2 space, where Amazon, Facebook, Google, all those who are nobody in the traditional space become so huge and really dominate the market over the last decade, when Web2 become really the main focus of the industry. To build this ecosystem, right, what needs to be changed is really the mindset of existing companies who, if they really are serious into going into the Web3 space, because Web 2, Web3, from Web 1.0 to Web 2 to Web 3, a lot of the concept is about giving out the power, distributing the power, giving back more resources to the power. Let's say in the case of medias, from newspaper, on television, towards online articles, and now Web3 towards decentralized model. So to be able to catch up with the space and be part of the ecosystem, I would say that a lot of traditional companies will have to be more open-minded in how they redefine the business order and the willingness to give out and distribute power towards the community. I think that is what I would say that for traditional companies to really catch up in and be part of the ecosystem. If not, I feel right, what will happen if the traditional companies don't really convert? It will become like the Web 2 where all the new Web 3.0 startups will be the one that leading the market. And by the time that the other older companies want to catch up, it will be too inflexible or too late to be into the market. So I would say like for the ecosystem building, it's really all about like having the correct mindset, having the flexibility and adopting the mindset to be able to be part of this ecosystem.
But the most important thing is how to build it to be attractive and sustained.
Yeah. For me, right, for that part, it will be a lot about the token economics and the cryptonomics. Because, like for example, let's take a look at the GameFi project, Axie Infinity. For users to be able to join in, they will be able to play the game and earn the SLP token. But at the end of the day, is the game complex enough to attract people to play the game just for playing the game? Or is it everybody playing it just to earn the incentive that they can get? But if people are just playing to earn the incentive, how sustainable is this token model to be? Will it be a lot of like price up and down, a lot of volatility in the price of the token? So I think like in creating a sustainable ecosystem in the crypto and Web 3.0 space, involving token, which is a brand new commodity, right? Having a good understanding and balance on the economics of the token will be the key towards the long-term sustainability of this ecosystem. That's what I feel. It's not just the game fee, even like the DEX, even like the IDO platforms, NFTs also, everything that involve like all these tradable tokens, right? The economics point of view will be the key towards the long-term sustainability. That's my point of view.
What about you, Khun Jitinan? Building business models. How do you make it attractive and more sustained?
Yeah, I think the first one is the commitment of the developer. The intentions that they would like to create a commitment, create like a community, create an activity for the ecosystem. So that's the first one. And the second one, I do agree that tokenomics is an effective tool to be used. Because for tokenomics, we can shape behavior or incentivize participants in the ecosystem in a way that developer would like to be. So for tokenomics, there's various ways to shape and incentivize people in the community. Yeah.
And Sanjay, would you like to add anything to this?
Sorry, I'm muted. So I think about the collaboration and community, so we've seen the industry grow quite exponentially. So I think people are exploring a new business model, new collaboration, corporate trying to enter the space. They have to come in with a new mindset. A lot of them, I think, has missed the bus from going from Web 1 to Web 2.0. So I think they don't want to miss out on that stuff again. So I think this time is very important for them to come in with some sort of plan or some sort of vision, and to be able to attract, you can see globally, lifestyle-related company are coming in, financial company are coming in, whether it's to NFT, exploring digital asset, real estate company are exploring new funding method. Artists are being able to monetize their engagement with the fan, create community from themselves. So I think it's very exciting time to be at this moment in time, and there's potentially to see how this will grow in the future, and also it'll be not only about investment, right? So I think everyone will be affected by this one way or another. Yeah, so I'd probably say it's a great time to be in at this moment in time.
So we're talking about creating business models, we're talking about opportunities and also how to make it attractive. So my question is, what kind of next technologies and financial innovations will we see in the digital assets? Khun Jitinan ka.
With the advancement of technologies and with the financial engineering in mind, I think both come together. It will create like innovations or more advanced or capturing opportunity in the markets. Purely only technology is not thing. It needs to come up with like financial knowledge and also with the financial engineering to make it like more like effective. That's what I think. And for the next section of financial innovation, I think it's relevant to regulations as well, because we talk about like DeFi's, benefit of DeFi's, cutting off like intermediary peer-to-peer transactions. But right now, we all know that regulators step up to like try to regulate certain activity of the DeFi space. Or digital assets. So I do expect to see like not purely like 100% DeFi, but maybe like CeDeFi is the solution or compromise way for like a developer and also the regulator. For CeDeFi, it's allow people to experience the DeFi's product and service. In the meantime, they can comply like certain regulations as well. Yeah.
So I think the trend, I would probably say, is very hard to predict, to be honest. Like we see new innovation on a monthly basis in this industry. So I've been here seeing from the early DeFi era, where the UX UI is completely horrible, to right now where people are getting into DeFi a bit easier, but still a lot of roadblock, right, for the normal people to enter this space. And then we've seen the development of GameFi, we've seen the development of NFT, whether as to show your status as a collectible, to be able to earn on different games. So I think in the future, right, we are unlocking potentially new business model. You're going to see a lot of Web 2 and 3 kind of hybrid model. Global companies are taking NFT very seriously. First of all, they see it as a view of people are being able to own actually the asset that they have. Then we can talk about how we're going to monetize the asset. Future, I would probably look. Another trend I think interesting to look at is also monetization of your own data. I think that will be a very big topic in the future. Right now, a lot of platforms that we are using use our data without giving us any reward, right? So I think in the future, everything that we own can be monetized in the digital world. I think, and we can actually really have a true ownership of it. So I'll probably say we're going to have like some new business model coming out of that. Then we are talking about the CeFi and DeFi that Jitinath mentioned. I would say that is also probably one of the big trends. And then we haven't talked about the metaverse part that we can actually help be part of the ecosystem, the DAO concept where we actually have everyone has some voting right. Whether it works or not is one thing, but I think it's probably to be an interesting concept for community to be part of, have a decisive vote on certain things that the platform can do or the foundation can do, and also how to run this whole space as a big community. So I'd probably say it's a bit impossible to predict, but I think as this market moves very fast, there's a lot of new innovation every other day. So we'll probably see how it goes as well in the future. Yeah.
And what about you, Mr. Chongying? What do you see? What kind of next technology and financial innovations will we see in the digital assets?
So for me, right, like just now what Sanjay mentioned for DeFi, right, it moves so fast. Within a year, right, we are now seeing the industry talking about something called DeFi 2.0, which is building more method of financial products through the usage of the DeFi 1.0 products. But I would say that for the main innovation to happen, right, at the end of the day, regulators is all about protecting the consumers, and also preventing the AML from happening. So that's why I would say for DeFi to really take off, right, and being recognized globally by the regulators, right, the two parts of it, which is the KYC part, we are now seeing some DeFi platforms starting to begin to integrate KYC solution to them. And second is the transaction monitoring part, which is, I think over the last few years is being kept under the media spotlight, but which is, I think will be the key component for DeFi to be accepted globally, even by regulators. Because with the transaction monitoring, we can confidently tell the regulators that money laundering is not happening, AML compliance is being done properly, and with this is a lot of like stronger power to be able to persuade regulators. And with the regulatory support, right, definitely the financial space for DeFi and crypto will definitely boom. That's what I hope that we will be able to see in the next few years. The technology is actually already out there. It's just now it's all about adoption, like being used by all the different protocols.
What should the companies or businesses be prepared towards this?
So for Toko-wise, transaction monitoring-wise, we are using a company called Merkle Science. They are based in Singapore. Basically, they help to do like a lot of like on-chain analysis to identify like where the crypto transactions happen. Is the transactioning happening between two crypto wallets of like illegal activities, or is it this being sent to like the exchange where the users is not KYC? So all these are things that I think regulators nearing the future will be able to understand, and from there they will be able to know that in actual fact, right, crypto transactions are more transparent than traditional bank fiat transparency. So the only reason now it's not being regulated, I feel, is they don't understand how to analyze the tool and how to use the tools yet. It's already there. So it will all be about regulating the regulators and letting them see that crypto is actually safe as long as you know the correct tool to use, and you can prevent all sorts of criminal activities from happening. Yeah.
Do you agree with that, Kun Jitinan ka? Do you agree that cryptocurrency is actually more transparent than the traditional way?
Yeah, I think in terms of technical perspective, yes. Because we leverage blockchain, and the blockchain is like encourage the transparency for sure. Yeah, but I think it's just the way that people use cryptocurrency for like a specific purpose that may trigger concerns from the government, but not purely from the technical perspective. Yeah, that's what I think.
What about you, Kun Sanjay?
Oh yeah, I completely agree with that. I think with the crypto transaction that we can view on crypto is as transparent as it gets. So you can monitor anything that is data that is on chain. People are actually monitoring all the wallets, what is going on within the ecosystem. We can actually see, right, even like in some protocol, whether Ethereum, Terra, AVAX, what is the movement in it, how much revenue are they generating, what is the wallet movement of the people keeping it at their cold wallet, taking out of the exchange, what are they doing with it. I would probably say is much more transparent compared to even the traditional equity market, right? Because that one you have to wait for the company to declare their profit and loss statement and all the balance sheet. Over here, I think the balance sheet is on chain, and you can see everything right away, right? You don't need the company to come tell you and do a report on what exactly is going on. You can use the data on chain as a core basis. I think that's the main beauty of it, actually, to be able to see everything transparently. And there are people and the community helping monitoring this in a almost a real-time format, I would say. So, yeah, completely agree, Kap.
Okay, Kap. So now we are going to talk about the digital assets, how they're helping to reshape the financial ecosystem and becoming the future financial mainstream, and who would benefit from this? Who would benefit from this the most, Mr. Sanjay?
I'll probably say like that's a very bit difficult one. I would probably say a lot of new existing company will benefit from this, but at the same time, right? Whether you are an entertainment company, a corporate retail store, a bank, a financial institution, digital asset will be something that you have to look into. For example, if your corporate want to do a loyalty point, should that be changed into a fully decentralized digital asset? being for people be able to accumulate other business model like even shop to earn, right? It's like a cashback already system that already exists within the traditional financial industry, like the credit card itself. So I'd probably say a lot of, I think all industry should be concerned about this, whether you're media, financial institution, banks, or even anyone. But for you be able to starting point at this part, right? You probably have to have some sort of strategy, derive it back down, right? And see, and to let your control go a bit to be able to monetize on the new Web3 era. Because you cannot have the same Web2 mentality going into the Web3, because Web3 is all about the community collaboration, distributing the ownership to everyone else, right? So I probably see the way that people want to lose control of the control they have is probably the hardest thing they have to get their head wrapped around. Yeah.
คุณจิตตินันท์คะ
Yeah, I think as the world is moving into like digital economy, so for digital asset definitely play a very important role for the digital economy, and for the digital assets, I think it's provide a new way of people to store its value, like things value, and a new way to for people to transact in like global economy. So I think that's the how it will move like as the way like economy moving into like digital economy. Yeah.
But do you think that who would benefit the most?
Yeah, I think it has to be everyone, because once like it needs to be like developer, it needs to be like user or investor, it needs to be also like a community or regulator as well, because once you like develop a product without user demand, it's like meaningless. And once you develop a product that's illegal, it's like impossible, right? So it needs to be like everyone to win this game. Yeah.
What about you, Mr. Chong-Ying? Would you like to add anything to this?
I think for me, definitely everybody will be like benefited from this. But what I want to add on a bit more is like the one who will benefit the most, I feel, will be towards the unbanked population throughout the globe. Because like for me, like crypto tokens, all these are very good way and low barrier of entry for unbanked people who previously not being accessible to the banks, be it because of location-wise, be it because of like, let's say, the minimum wealth or minimum deposit, they didn't meet the requirement for them to set up the bank account. But now all of these people can actually get access towards the crypto financial space. And this can be through DeFi, this can be through GameFi, this can be through all the ecosystem that's being developed. And the important thing is, right, all this ecosystem doesn't require those people to have a minimum capital. You can even purchase, let's say, a Bitcoin with just $10 worth or $15 worth. Unlike if you go towards like the traditional banking, if you want to access the stock market, you need to have a minimum capital of like maybe a few $100 or a few $1,000 to buy a lot. So these are ways that I will say that for this unbanked population, which is so big in the Southeast Asia and ASEAN country, ASEAN region, right? They should be the one that actually benefit the most when this really take off. Like they can start doing savings or investment with just $10, $15. They can start playing games to earn extra income, which will actually really change their life quite significantly, I feel.
Well, since you already say that it's more transparent than the traditional way, so do you think that digital asset will eventually become the world's financial mainstream? And would that actually replacing the traditional financing system?
I won't go to the extreme of saying replace. Basically, definitely like in the current, like let's say, like it won't be an extreme case of replace or like for example, like when we go from traditional to Web2, traditional companies are still there because they have the audience that preferred that kind of ecosystem. We have the Gen Y, my generation, who prefer the social media, the Google kind of era. And Web3 is the same. When Web3 comes, there will be a group of people who prefer this new model. But it doesn't mean that the older model is totally being eliminated. They will still be there. It's just that it catered to different target audience. That's my thought.
Okay. So my last questions, I would like to ask, what would be your advice for a beginner who are interested in to invest into this digital asset, or enter into this digital world? Because I believe that in the end, everyone will move towards that platform. Kun Jittinanka, would you like to start first?
Yeah, I would suggest that trying to understand what you are going to invest, because there's a wide variety of various type of digital asset like cryptocurrency, investment token or utility token, which have like embedded certain feature in there. So I would recommend that investor try to understand, try to find information first, because it's not just the risk of underlying asset, but there's a risk in terms of cyber security as well. So that there's an options or like various investments. You can like invest directly, or you can like invest via fund management. There's like various options, but my recommendation is trying to understand what you are going to invest. Yeah.
What about you, Kun Sanjay? Would you like to advise anything for a new beginner? Where can they start?
For sure. So I would probably say the first thing they have to have is strategy coming into the market, right? Like you have to have a clear strategy, what you expect for the expected outcome that you have. Second thing is risk management. Be able to hedge your risks and going in and know the risk reward on what you are investing in. Thirdly, have thorough research, right? Knowing what you want to invest in and why you invest in it, the conviction you have, especially also being in it for the long term, not for speculative purposes. So you will have like a longer thesis and a longer conviction on where this is heading. But I think also things to avoid is just like speculation, going all in, buying because your friend told you so. And also the things to avoid is also being able to keep your digital asset, right? And know the differences between keeping your asset in exchange platform or keeping it yourself. And also, I think importantly, playing around with it, starting off small and playing around with it to learn a bit more, right? Whether it's DeFi, GameFi, investment, staking. So there's plenty of stuff for people to do in this space. So just have to play around a bit, and if you want to play around, start small. That's all. And then once you have more conviction, you can have a more longer term strategy and diversify as you see fit. Yep.
And Mr. Chong Ying, what would be your advice for a beginner?
Well, actually, most of the points is being covered by the rest of the tool. So those are but like what they say is don't put all your money in. Only invest what you can afford to lose, because you never know what will happen. Like let's say in 2017 the market crashed 80%, but who knows in 2020 it grows up I think 3x more than during the 2017 peak. So but the thing is, can you wait 3 years for your money to be there before it comes up? So if you have to liquidate your asset during those periods, it's basically very painful. So that's why I will always recommend my friend to only invest what you can afford to lose. Assume it can go to zero and it doesn't affect your lifestyle. Yeah, that I'll say is the important. And definitely use the license platform. There's a reason why it's licensed, because it's being checked by the regulators, it's being protected by the regulators. If something happen, at least they are there to be taken action on. Yeah.
Okay. So for beginners, please do your study before you start to invest. And of course, there are a lot of opportunities out there for you. So first of all, I would like to thank you very much for such an interesting and informative topic talk. Thank you, Kun Sanjay Popley, CEO and co-founder of CryptoMine, Kun Jittinan Chat Siharat, CEO of TokenX, and also Mr. Chongying Lai, Chief Strategy Officer from Indonesia.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you ขอบคุณครับสวัสดีครับ
สวัสดีค่ะ So now we have arrived to the end of our forums. I would like to welcome back Kun Jack ค่ะ
Well, good, Nina. That was a very interesting discussion that you had there about the digital assets and where they're heading in the future.
Starting from many stage, also the regulations are the key players for the future investments. So for now, I would like to thank you all of the speakers for wonderful and informative forums. Thank you to everyone who joined the forum. You can also watch the forum again on our channel, website, YouTube, Facebook. Thank you also to our sponsor, Huawei,
ZipMax,
BitCup,
Deepa,
and TNB Media Global.
And for the next International Virtual Forum, it will be on the topic of ESG, the trend of the decade, which will be in May of this year. Stay tuned with The Nation, and we hope to see you at the next forum. I am Jack Parinya Runprapan.
And I am Nina Nirasha Malisak Lami. สวัสดีค่ะ
สวัสดีครับ